Councilmember Davis Cohen.
Here.
Councilmember Grimes.
Here.
Councilmember Mail.
Here.
Councilmember Schultz.
Here.
Councilmember Siemens.
Present.
Councilmember Snipper.
Here. I have no power.
Is my microphone on? Okay. The lights aren't working.
My light's working.
Well,
Mine's working.
these two aren't. It's a conspiracy.
It is.
There are no additional agenda items tonight. On upcoming agendas, next Monday, the 23rd, there will be work session items on the Tacoma Langley Sector Plan Design Guidelines, implementation of the council's vision for the Recreation Department, and a discussion of ward nights and/or council engagement with the community. The following Monday, the 30th, is what I'm calling Financial Night. We're scheduled to have work session items on financial report from the city manager, discussion of large grant applications, and discussion of financial matters and budget priorities. The following Monday, February 6th, I'll call it Tree Night and Committee Night. We have presentations about the trees, and we have several discussions about committees. And then finally, Monday, February 13th, we have a presentation of the final report from the Tacoma Junction Task Force. So that's just a couple highlights from upcoming meetings. We'll next go to public comment period, and this would be the time for anybody who wants to make any comments about anything at all, since we have work session items tonight, and so it's a good time to talk about anything that's on our work session agenda or anything that's not on the agenda at all. And if anybody would like to come to the podium, and please identify yourself and keep your comments to 3 minutes. Mr. Lovelace in the back.
Hi, my name's Pat Lovelace, your peace delegate. And one thing I'd like to see doing now that we've started a new year and we got a whole new city council on our table now. I'd like to see what we could do to start getting more community participation in our meetings. You know, we've got all these new seats put in and everything, and no one's using them. But I'd like to see what we could do to get more community participation, whether it's through our schools, or whether it's through our courts, or whether it's through our neighbor to neighbor or something. But I'd like to see what we could do to get more community participation, you know, and having more people take up and have a more responsible role in what direction they want their city to go in. You know, it's also it's never too early to register to vote. You know, because I think last year I would have liked to see a better turnout. Of course, I always want to see a better turnout on that. But someday before I pass away, I'd like to see 100% voter turnout in Tacoma Park. Whether I ever will or not, I don't know. But that I would like to see. And also,
100%.
Also, as far as community participation is concerned, you know, we all got to realize, you know, that there are going to be several upcoming anti-war demonstrations in March. And possibly in February, there's one coming up. I'm not sure of the date. And they've been threatening to close down the D.C. occupations at McPherson Square. They've been giving them a hard time, so we've got to keep our eyes open on that and see what we can do to support them people. You know, they always need donations of food and stuff. But we'd like to do whatever we can to support those people. They're doing what they can to support us. You know, by trying to get our Wall Street people aware of the greed that they're doing and trying to put a stop to the war machine itself. And we'd like to, in turn, help them out. So we got to keep aware of the fact that they're starting to give them a hard time. D.C. government and the federal government are starting to give them a hard time. So, again, mainly I'd like to see is a lot more community participation in these meetings. There's no reason why we can't have these seats filled up. A lot of people don't understand that they can come to these meetings. A lot of people they say, what do I do to go to the meetings? Does it cost anything? I keep telling them, no, all you have to do is come on down. Usually on Mondays at 7:30, the meetings start, except on holidays like today, it's on a Tuesday. And anyway, I hope everybody had a good Martin Luther King holiday this weekend. Again, this week we should be thinking about what we can do to make Tacoma Park and our city and our country a more peaceful place to live. And if we get community participation with the youth coming to these meetings, that's a lot less kids out there playing with drugs. They're not playing with drugs. They're not playing with cocaine. They're not out prostituting. They're not out getting themselves beat up or hurt or stabbed or shot. Or racing their cars. They're out. They're doing something productive. By coming to these meetings. You remember, gangs. A main thing is they are trying to bring people to belong. It's a sense of belonging that gets kids wanting to join gangs. So if we can get kids and youth a sense of belonging within our community, that's one step toward beating the gangs. And I think we should really look forward to seeing what we can do to make this place more community participation. Thanks for letting me share.
Thank you.
Keep the peace. And let's do what we can for working for peace.
Anybody else? If you want to just come to the podium. And there's usually a buzzer that works with this, but there's a timer that shows there too. Buzzer isn't working tonight.
Hi.
Go ahead.
Hi. So my name is Nina Garfield, and I am in Ward 2, and I have a daughter at Piney Branch Elementary School. And I came out here today because Sally, I think it was you who started this idea of a crossing guard at Tacoma Junction. And it was, when I saw that email from her, I was like, of course, this totally makes sense. And I'm here to support that. And I just want to give a little, background with why it's important to me. I'm a single parent, and I live on that side of Carroll Avenue. And I work until 6. I have to be at work at 9. And my daughter's in 4th grade. She's here with me now. I don't know if she's going to want to talk or not. I don't know if she's brave enough, but I've been trying to encourage her. Because she has to walk home every day and cross that intersection. And when I'm at work, I am biting my nails at about 3:40, hoping that I get that phone call that she got home okay. And when Sally started this, I was so appreciative because I didn't think about it. I was like, yeah, why don't we have a crossing guard there? And I thought about it, and we have one at Piney Branch, which is about equidistance from the school. So we don't have them just at the school. We do have them at other important major crossings. And that whole neighborhood on the other side of Carroll Avenue is really in a dangerous situation with our kids. And so I'm here to support what Sally started, and it's the first time I've ever actually been here and commented, and it's hard for me to get the time when I'm at home after work to do this. But I feel so strongly about this that I wanted to come and support that. So that's my comment. Did you want to say anything what it's like to cross Carroll Avenue on your own?
It's really scary for me because it's really busy and cars. Just the light would be, I get really scared, so I wait for somebody to come and, because cars sometimes go zooming and they don't always follow the lights, and it's really, really scary for me.
Thanks very much. Thanks to both of you. Yeah.
You know this is important if I actually stand up in public because I'm phobic about this sort of thing. I just saw the addition to the, or I guess detail, that the crossing guard would work in conjunction with the current traffic light configuration. I think that there would be a lot of complaints about that. I'm not sure if you know that as the State Highway Administrator told us, one is supposed to cross both is supposed to wait in the island and to cross both sections. And I think that that is unrealistic for most pedestrians. I walk through the junction every day 4 times in the morning because I walk my middle schooler to school at 7:15, and then I walk back. Then I walk my Piney Branch child at 8:30, and then I walk back. And for me to stand in that island and wait to cross, and that would mean I would wait to cross to the island, I would go across the island, I would go down Piney and then come back and wait, and then I would go back over, and then I would wait. I don't want to stand there in the middle of the junction. I understand that the State Highway Administrator told my husband that he believes that motorists come first. And I know that it is a state highway, and I know the motorists need to get to work, but the kids need to get to school too. And I don't know if you know it, but middle schoolers are the ones that need the most sleep, and their day starts at 7:50. And I'm sorry, my heart's racing. But I don't think that they should have to start getting up extra early, because right now what everybody does is they zigzag across the crosswalk, and perilously so, because this fall they shortened it. Up until that point, it was a one-stage crossing. But at some point, and it was never publicly announced, there are no signs which say it's a two-stage crossing. Normally when something's a two-stage crossing, you would have a shorter section and you would cross the one, and then the light would be timed for the secondary crossing at a different point. But now it's not obvious to your average pedestrian that you're supposed to cross separately. I also think that I've talked many times to Cecil Ward, the State Highway Administrator, and I believe that Tacoma Park should stand up and say, let them cross all at once. And I really like your idea about doing the one-stage crosswalk across from the co-op, the new crosswalk. I think that would be great. You get the kids to cross in one fell swoop, and I think that would really add to the safety aspect. All right. Well, I'm available anytime to talk as your average consumer. I've been walking that since 2004, every single day. I've seen so many near accidents. I've also asked that that they put a no exit sign on the inside of the co-op, because I'd say about every week or so, someone comes out of the co-op not realizing that it's a one-way entrance, and at that point they're not governed by any lights because they're not where they're supposed to be, and they just come careening through the junction. Same thing with Grant. That happens about every week or so. So.
Thanks very much. And can you tell us your name?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm Sally Kern.
Okay. Thanks. Anybody else?
Hi, I'm David Rowland, and I live on Poplar Avenue. And I was also sort of astounded that I hadn't thought of the idea of a crossing guard. When I heard about it, was just made total sense. And my daughter is at Tacoma Park Middle, and when we were first deciding about her walking to school on her own, there was discussion among the parents of her and her friends about taking that route, and we decided not to have them do that because we thought that would be too dangerous. And so instead, they get up 15 to 20 minutes earlier than they would normally need to take an alternate route going over by Old Town Tacoma Auto. And so they have to get up earlier, walk a farther distance, and take a back route to the school, whereas they're already needing to be there at 7:50, and it's already difficult for a middle schooler to get enough sleep. So having that direct route to the schools would be advantageous from a safety standpoint with the crossing guard, and also from the ability for them to get more sleep in the morning, walking to school. And I am also concerned about the idea of doing this in 2 stages. I don't think that would work. I know if it was 2 stages, my daughter would still not take that route to school because you wait 3-4 minutes. It's one of the longest waits in the county, I think, at that intersection coming out by the co-op. You'd wait several minutes to cross 20 feet, and then you'd have to wait several minutes again to cross the other 40 feet. And so while it'd be nice to have the crossing guard there, I think you would actually send people away if the crossing guard was there for 2 sections, because now people can do catty corner to get across in one. And still, even doing that, you have to kind of hurry along or you don't make it in time. And if you added 4 or 5 seconds to the crossing, you'd have enough for 2 stages with a crossing guard. The kids would be safe. They wouldn't need to take alternate routes. They'd get more sleep in the morning. Or an alternate crosswalk somewhere where they could do it in 1 stage. Something where they would be both safe and be able to have a quicker route to school, because there are a lot of kids that take an alternate route as it is now. So I'm all for the crossing guard, just in a way that would work out. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Samantha Shofar. I live on Sycamore Avenue. I also have 2 children, one who crosses that intersection very early in the morning to get to the bus to Blair, and my son also goes to Piney Branch. I don't have a lot to add. I pretty much agree with what everybody said. I just want to say that I'm also in favor, very much so, of a crossing guard, but not in 2 stages. I agree that that would probably drive people away from the intersection, the kids and the parents.
Thanks. Anybody else?
I'm Howard Cohn, representing the Tacoma Junction Task Force. We'll be back about a month from now, but we want to make a couple of points tonight. One, we're in favor of the idea of crossing guards as a safety measure at the junction, but our larger point is that a crosswalk that used to exist between what's now the city lot and Grant Avenue should be reestablished, should be reinstated. And this, of course, is not up to us or up to you, but up to the SHA. And along those lines, we think that really a public discussion about the various options, the various possibilities at the junction is really necessary. We've talked about this. As a group, we've had our own discussions with the SHA, but we think it should go public, and we should talk about it in a holistic way. Thanks.
Thank you.
It occurs to me that, Kathy Breckbill, Woodland, it occurs to me that over a year ago when we were talking about who actually owned 410, which is the state highway we're talking about right now, that there was some discussion that the final arrangement should include that we would have control of sidewalks, some signage, and crosswalks. And I believe that Darrell spoke to that to some degree. My memory is a little fuzzy, but in fact, this conversation came up over a year ago. And that was one of the goals in the resolution of how that should work with 410. So if that, in fact, is the case, we do have some control about where our crosswalks are and how they should operate. I think the state probably still controls, or the county still controls the lighting, but there are rules about when someone is in a crosswalk, they have the right of way. So cars do not have the right of way. Thanks.
Thank you. Just a quick follow-up on that. The city's attorney and the state highway attorney have been in discussion on coming up with that MOU for 410, and my understanding is that that's going to be coming back on the agenda sometime in the next couple of weeks. So we'll have an opportunity to see where those negotiations are and what, in fact, we may be able to get and what we won't be able to get. Any further comments?
Autumn Harrison, Aspen Ave. We just moved into that neighborhood from further up over on, off of Flower, and I was so excited because I realized we were within a mile and we could walk it, and it would be, grand to walk to school every day. It's not possible because I have a 3-year-old and a stroller. So a 3-year-old and a 7-year-old, the way it is now, it's not doable to walk it. For me, maybe there's other people who are have a little more gumption, but so we're stuck being part of the traffic problem at that intersection because I have to pile everybody in the car and we have to go that way. So I'm all in favor of it, and I think there's some smart ideas about how to make that intersection better with the people who actually live in the area as opposed to just traffic flow. Okay, that's all I have to say.
Thank you.
I'm Lori Chirkudi, and I'm on Ethan Allen Avenue. And I actually wanted to talk about the other work session item, the kitchen. So I wanted to say that I think, I just want to put in a little bit of context. I've seen several emails sort of all around the issue today. And I want to remind you all that what we're trying to do is create a sustainable local food system. And that to do that the kitchen is one piece of that. But one kitchen is a very tiny piece of that. And really what we need to do is have several community, shared use, community commercial kitchens. And so we're talking about a long-term and significant undertaking and building this sort of structure. And the sort of competition, if you will, are the corporate food giants, right? So Cargill, ADM, they've been building their infrastructures for years. Their infrastructures include the ownership of several congressional representatives. And so when we're talking about building an alternative sort of a food system, it's not just one kitchen in one place that we need to figure out how to do, one business incubator. It really is, it's going to require us to be really courageous and really visionary and really creative with the resources that are out there. And so churches are going to be a really important resource as a potential place. Churches that are social mission driven are going to be a really important resource as a potential place for this kind of microenterprise, food safety, food security work to happen. And I feel like what better group of people than the Tacoma Park City Council to be that courageous, visionary, creative force to start to make that happen, really to start to change that. Like, we got to make it happen here. It's got to start somewhere. I do understand that there's a concern about potential abuses, and I think that the first thing that I would point out is that there are several churches in commercially zoned areas right now who have the potential to use commercial kitchens, and they don't. So it's not like every church is lining up just waiting for the zoning to change and then everybody's going to open up a commercial kitchen. I wish that they would. I mean, I wish all the commercially zoned ones would use their kitchens that way, to start to build this infrastructure, but they're not. And so I don't think there's a reason to believe that everybody's going to rush to adding commercial kitchens when the zoning change takes place. I do think that the 2 of the 3 changes suggested by staff are really strong. I think changing the definition is really strong. It's exciting to put the terms shared use, community, commercial kitchen, to create a definition for that. I think it's an important term that we ought to be talking about, and it ought to be in our zoning. So I think that that's a really good addition. And I think the additional limit of 1,200 square feet limit, the combination of the 1,200 square feet and the less than 5%, I think create all the protections that we need. I think that shifting from permission to special exception is a really major mistake. I think that it's a huge burden on a church that's a nonprofit that's interested in doing social programming to go through the process, the special exception process. It's very expensive and it's very time consuming. And I think it'll, for those churches that are interested in doing this from a social mission perspective, I think that it'll create an undue burden and it'll have a dampening effect on what we're trying to do in creating this kind of an infrastructure.
Thanks.
Good evening. Hi, my name is Tababu. I live in Ward 4. I'm here to share my excitement about the commercial kitchen. I was just there Sunday contributing to that effort from the sale of my coffee. And to me, it's more than a kitchen. To me, it is a living economy. We're about to start a living, dynamic economy in our city, which brings us together. And the first time I heard, I went home imagining how I can utilize that space to support the business that I want to bring to the town. And then I had a conversation with some of the people who are talented in cooking different cuisines, how they can come together and utilize the kitchen to start to upgrade their economic development. And so this is another piece of jewel that can create a living, dynamic, exciting community from business incubation to creating a community that's bound together with an economical engagement that reflects our true, deeply pledged social value. And I went to church to contribute the little check that I had, but I gave them my heart, and I'm going to support their activity. I'm going to promote it. It's beyond this little community. It shows hope to the other communities, and whatever needs to be done to make sure that's the case, we need to talk to make that thing a reality, I'm committed to. And so I just want to add my little voice to it, to the gigantic idea that brings each and every one of us to a collective social living space. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Mary Forrest, and I would like to comment on item number 1. If that's still on the agenda. Okay. And I apologize for coming in late, but I'm Mary Forrest. I live on Elm Avenue in Ward 3, and my family and I are very much in favor of a crossing guard at Tacoma Junction. I've been a pedestrian in Tacoma Park for about 17 years, and that's, to me, one of the most dangerous intersections, and particularly for children because of the amount of time you're given to cross that intersection. So I think it's almost beyond question that adding a crossing guard could forestall a future tragedy of a child crossing that intersection. Also, I mean, a crossing guard, the presence of a crossing guard also gives a parent and a citizen comfort. It's just an additional pair of eyes. We don't live in a crime-free area at all. In fact, I spent today testifying in a criminal trial at a robbery at the co-op. I mean, there's no question that we live in an area that's not totally free of crime, and having an additional pair of eyes, I think, is a positive. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Philip Lynch, Woodland Avenue, Ward 2. I live on a street where my children have to walk across the gauntlet, as I refer to it, to get to school, to be picked up for the bus that takes my son Aiden to Eastern Middle School. The hub, one of the hubs, is Piney Branch Elementary here, so it's a pickup for students who go to Oakland Terrace, Eastern, as well as students who attend Piney Branch. Also, as you know, this facility, which houses pre-care, aftercare, is also a location where students from our street in our area have to cross the gauntlet of those two streets to get to. The inconvenience of, and I know not everything can be convenient, but the inconvenience of knowing that your children have to cross a dangerous intersection like that with a light that's not timed properly. I understand that it's timed for a double crossing is not is not something that gives us on our side of the street good thoughts. So it changes our patterns. We have to, as adults, as parents on that side of the street, walk our children up, make sure they cross safely or cross with them, when typically I would basically give my children at that distance from their school or their pre-care or their art program or their library or all the activities that they need to cross to get to. I would basically give them a little kiss on the cheek and send them on their way. Instead, I have to rearrange my entire schedule in the morning so that I can be there at that crosswalk, make sure they cross or cross with them, and then bid them on their way after they get through that intersection. I timed it this morning. It took 4 minutes and 30 seconds to go across the two sections to get to a spot where if there was a single crosswalk in front of the co-op that crossed the one street, it would take, if you walked up, pushed the button, it would take you 2 minutes. If the lights stayed timed the way they are currently. Right now, based on my stopwatch this morning, it was a 2 minute and then a 2 minute, and then you walk up to get to the same spot where if you push the button, you would wait typically 2 minutes to cross once. For teenagers, what I witnessed at that time, and for adults too who don't always have great judgment, a 4 minute, 30 minute wait is just not really something that they're going to sit through. So what ends up happening is they do what I witness every day, and they try to sprint across both streets, or they just cross without waiting at all. So asking folks to wait that long typically just isn't something that's reasonable, and they're not going to do it, and it just creates even more of a hazard when you ask people to wait an unreasonable amount of time. So as I said, it's a gauntlet. They have to cross 2 streets. One crosswalk would help solve that problem. Crossing one way, you head down, there's a nursing home, there's a hospital, there's a university. Everything that we need to cross for our children would be one crosswalk. So I think that's a solution. I'm also in favor of a crossing guard there at the high traffic times for students going to the elementary school.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Emily Schaubacher. I'm also on Woodland Avenue. And I think it's been said very well, but just to be another voice in favor of a crossing guard. I think it's going to take some analysis to figure out where to put the crossing guard, but I think that it seems like it's pretty much, at least from the point of view of the neighbors who need to cross that street with their kids, there's no doubt that there needs to be some kind of guard there, some kind of crossing guard. I will say that I agree that having it, if you stage it as a 2-part crossing, you are essentially going to create a situation where you're inviting people to rush across in one of those stages. And going through that every morning with my children, especially my 7-year-old, every morning I stand in the middle going like this, So if you could have a crossing guard doing that instead of me, that would be ideal. Thank you.
Thanks. Anybody else?
Hi, I'm Catherine Tunis. I wanted to change the topic just a little bit. First of all, to speak on the commercial kitchen issue, I think it's a great asset for the community, but I think you also need to consider not just notifying the neighbors, the immediate neighbors, but they should have a great say on whether or not a special exception is approved or not. So hopefully you'll consider that. I wanted to report also that we've had a couple of meetings in the last week in Ward 2, and there was not a lot of support for the proposed changes to the process that Councilmember Mayo has suggested. It sort of seems a lot like moving the goalpost. If you're not getting the outcome you want, just ask more or different people in a different way. And it's not affected. So, I mean, it's not appropriate. It seems very unfair. And so this gets back to the same thing, is that the people who are most affected by installing a new sidewalk should have the most say of whether or not it goes there. I think that there is broad support, and I really would love to work with council on issues where there is broad support, and there is broad support, I've heard over a number of years, in Ward 2 and Ward 6 for traffic calming measures. And I think that I've heard some suggestions last night that Long Branch Sligo is hoping to move forward with, and I think that there are a lot of solutions like that, things like crossing guards at intersections where it makes a difference, things like better markings on the street for crosswalks, or even raised intersections and things like that, where it's lower cost, it is effective in lowering the speed of the traffic and making it safer for pedestrians and vehicles alike. So I think that we can find things to move forward on together that are not divisive, such as installing sidewalks on side streets where we don't need them. There is support for sidewalk on some of the main streets, and Carroll Avenue near the Sligo Creek Bridge is one of the ones where has been frequently mentioned. And I know there's some issues also on New Hampshire Avenue, and if we could find support for that as well, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello. I have some comments I'm going to read. I'm not good at public speaking, and when something's important, especially, I need to read. My name is Joan Clement. I live at 506 Elm Avenue here in Tacoma Park, and I'm here to encourage your support for the zoning text amendment changes for the commercial kitchen. I volunteer with a local nonprofit group called CHEERS, the Chesapeake Education, Arts, and Research Society, which is dedicated to healing the Chesapeake watershed and all who share it. CHEERS supports a variety of projects, including permaculture education, community gardens, and curricula to help teachers meet Maryland's new environmental literacy standards. CHEERS takes a broad view of the deep and structural changes that are needed to build a sustainable way of life. We support this project because it addresses a vital need for healthy, locally produced food and food production capabilities in our community. Local food is the backbone of a healthy, sustainable local economy. We live in a time where we depend on food from other parts of the world that is produced and transported in a manner that is polluting our air, ruining our climate, destroying our soil, mismanaging our water, and threatening the existence of healthy ecosystems. Our dependence on food from other localities weakens our ability to respond to crises. A sustainable community is one that can feed itself. This project offers a creative win-win strategy to help us transition away from our centralized industrial agriculture food system and replace it with a decentralized, sustainable, healthy, and safe local food system. It will do this by helping low-income people earn money and feed their families, by creating markets for local farmers, and by providing locally raised and produced food for the general community. The proposed zoning text amendment will allow churches to help meet this pressing community need by providing kitchen space for small micro-enterprises to process local foods. This activity fits well within the church's nonprofit mission. These small food processing activities would generate little traffic and would generally take place during weekdays. Although health and sanitation requirements require upgrades, the changes in how the kitchens are used would not impact nearby neighbors. Churches should be used throughout the week, and small food production operations need a place to work. The proposed zoning text amendment allows churches that are willing to go through all of the cost and ongoing compliance issues required of a commercial kitchen to be encouraged and not discouraged to do so. This model has been proven in other parts of the country and should be encouraged as much as possible. I have my testimony written, and I've attached an example of a program in New York that's located in a church that's really a model for what we'd like to accomplish. This effort goes hand in hand with all of the other environmental and energy infrastructure changes that you're already working on, and I'm asking that you provide leadership in this area as well. Thanks.
Thank you. And you want to give us a copy of that? Great, thanks. Anybody else?
I don't have an agenda. I'm
curious about, are we discussing sidewalks?
This is the point to comment on anything, because anything that's on the agenda tonight is a work session item, and therefore now's the time to comment on it.
I think that this was already discussed at an earlier meeting about sidewalks in my particular neighborhood, and I'm probably late to the dance, but I'd like to throw in my vote for sidewalks. I think it's a good idea. I have little kids who, it's just a lot easier to get from point A to point B if you have sidewalks to learn how to roller skate or ride a bike on where you're not competing with traffic. Even traffic slowed by speed bumps, they still knock somebody down. So, and I understand that the fear is maybe traffic through our neighborhood, but I don't necessarily see that as a downside. So I'm not really sure the argument against sidewalks. Somebody wants to clarify that for me, I'm happy to listen. Okay.
I'm sure somebody will. Anybody else? Okay, thank you all. We will move along to council comments, and then the city manager's comments, and then we'll get to the work session items. Any comments from my colleagues? Councilmember Siemens.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you all for coming tonight. It's great to see so many people here with us. I just wanted to express my appreciation to all the people who came out for the Martin Luther King celebration yesterday, and also for the people who organized it. I thought the event was the best celebration of that holiday in recent years. It had a great cross-section of the community there, and the day's celebration included not just the event last night, which was a potluck dinner, but also a day's worth of various service projects for the community. The level of participation was heartwarming, and I thank everybody who participated.
Anybody else?
I punched. Me?
Oh, doesn't work.
Oh, okay.
Go ahead.
I'm going to second a lot of what Councilmember Seaman said, and thank you, Mayor Williams. And also, thank you all for being here tonight. It's really, really breathtaking to see this many folks out for whatever you want to discuss. It's really exciting. Come back again. It's fun. Darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. And that is one of the many Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. quotes that probably we've all heard. And yesterday, my I Have a Dream speech became true because I had the opportunity to be in the presence of a whole lot of love. There was a spectacular showing of warmth and care at the Tacoma Park Engaging the Dream Festival. And I call it a festival because that was the energy surrounding it. An incredible undertaking by a group of Tacoma Parkers who, I guess, just all of a sudden over the holidays decided to make this happen. And they were cause in it, and they did make it happen. I'm told there were about 150 people at the streetscape cleanup at the junction, and there were so many clothes donated and food donated to the Adventist Community Services. Last night, the wrap-up celebration, I had to have been over 200 folks there over the evening, and there were great performances by our very own city people. What was most spectacular, and that's why I went there, was to hear the excerpts from the I Have a Dream speech. I think we should all read that speech at least once a year, just to continue to get ourselves grounded in what life is all about. But it was read by 25 Piney Branch elementary school students, and it made my heart go pound. Perhaps the most moving moment was singing "We Shall Overcome." It was 1968 all over again for me. It brought a tear to my eye, and it does right now. And it brought a lot of warmth to my heart. And I got that maybe we will all begin to live in a nation
where people will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. And it may even happen in my lifetime. Last evening was that kind of a moment. I was humbled and proud to have had the chance to be a part of it, and I'm looking forward to many more inspiring events just like that one. I thank everybody who had the perseverance and the thought and the creativity to have come up with it. It was, I think, probably one of the first times Tacoma Park has ever done anything that big to celebrate Martin Luther King and his legacy. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Siemens has an additional
Thank you.
comment.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify that it wasn't just the community members who came together, but also community organizations that helped and participated in the event. For example, it was Washington Adventist University who did the clothes collection and food collection for Adventist Community Services. They also had young people from the college going and visiting seniors at the nursing home, and another group of the students went downtown to the District of Columbia and served food and talked with homeless people. And in fact, that's going to be an ongoing project now for this university. Thank you.
Councilmember Schultz.
Thank you. It's a little hard after those eloquent comments to segue to what I want to talk about, but I guess I can begin by acknowledging that cleanliness is next to godliness. I think we've heard that phrase before, and on that basis, I would thank the Department of Public Works for installing 3 sets of trash cans in the Ward 6 area that we had asked for and budgeted for in the current fiscal year budget. And so it took a while for the supplier to actually show up with these things, but they did get installed, and that's thanks to Daryl Braithwaite and her crews. There's 3 sets. Each set contains a regular trash can and a recyclable trash can, and with the idea that if you have trash cans that are for the public use, that people will be a little less likely to throw the trash in the street, which we have a lot of in our neighborhood. I don't know about the rest of the neighborhoods in this city. The other thing I just wanted to say is a reminder of our January 26th meeting, which is a Thursday at 7 o'clock at Sligo Adventist School, sometimes referred to as SAS, on Carroll Avenue, where Chief Ricucci and the commander of the district, 1st District in Hyattsville, will be addressing the community on crime issues affecting the greater Ward 6 area. And by that I mean not just the Tacoma Park section, but the parts Prince George's County and Silver Spring, which are equally affected. And that's why I invited Major Hector Velez to come and speak at this meeting alongside Chief Ricucci. But I did get an email tonight from Major Velez, who told me that he's been promoted, much to his, I'm sure, happiness. And it's another officer by the name of Brewer. I'm not sure of his name, but I just saw it before I left the house, will be taking his position and will address the issues. And some of those issues involve the very late night activities emanating from the go-go clubs and nightclubs, which have liquor licenses over in the La Union Mall, which is just across the boundary along Holton Lane. That has resulted in a lot of noise, particularly for the people in Carroll Highlands, but a lot of disturbances, gang fights, and this sort of thing in my ward. And that's just one of a number of issues that residents in this area are concerned about, and they're looking forward to the opportunity just to listen and to ask questions and offer ideas. Again, that's January 26th, Thursday evening at Sligo Adventist School. Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, we'll move to the city manager's comments. All right, then we will move along to our first work session item, which is the discussion of the proposal to add a crossing guard at Tacoma Junction. Who wants to, do you want to
I'll just make
introduce that?
introductory comments. Obviously, there's already been a considerable amount of discussion of this issue this evening. Councilmembers Daniels Cohen and Councilmember Mail had received a letter some time ago from a number of residents endorsing the idea of putting a crossing guard in Tacoma Junction. Tonight's work session will give the council the opportunity to discuss that proposal and to provide some direction to staff. Just a couple issues I just wanted to call out from the cover sheet to make sure they didn't get overlooked. The annual cost of a crossing guard will somewhat vary depending on the benefit election of the person who would be hired. On an annual basis, the cost we estimate would be approximately $11,500, and the recruitment process for a new crossing guard would take approximately 90 days from start to finish. It is the staff's recommendation that if the council chooses to put another crossing guard in the junction, that the position be funded out of the speed camera fund. As the council is aware, those monies can be used for anything that promotes public safety. As I noted in the special consideration section, there may be an opportunity down the road to seek an increase in our tax duplication payment for crossing guards. One of the requirements of that process is to be able to demonstrate that the pedestrian counts match those that the county would use in citing their own guards. As was indicated by a number of parents here this evening, it would be difficult to get accurate counts at this time because many parents, for safety reasons, are choosing not to have their kids cross in that location. So if the council does direct the hiring of a crossing guard, what I would suggest is that after the guard has been in place, that the police department maintain some pedestrian counts and at an appropriate time in the future, that I would submit that information to the county executive's office and see about getting an increase in our tax duplication payment. One of the issues that was discussed this evening, I'd like to have Chief Rakucci come up and address this, was why we had suggested that the guard would actually cross pedestrians in two separate segments. As was mentioned on the cover sheet, it is our customary practice to have the guards follow the pattern that the signals are set at, and Chief Rakucci can speak to that a little bit more.
It's our customary practice when we work with the light, not against it. The way is intersection set up now, we would have, if we have one crossing guard, they would bring them across to the middle section, wait for the light to change, and take them to the second. Working against the light goes against standard procedures that we use, and it would be not safe to do. Obviously, if we could get SHA to change the timing of the light, that would work in our favor. But I think we all know in dealing with SHA, there's no promises that could happen. But we could always request it again, which I think has been requested on several occasions already. If they wanted to cross, if it was the council's direction to cross, then we would need two guards, because from a safety standpoint, you cannot do it with one guard, take them all the way across with the way the light's set up at this point. We don't change practices. It's for safety reasons we do this. It's a practices we've used in the past throughout the city, and our record of protecting our children stands for itself. Here in our city, we have a very dedicated group of crossing guards. We'd obviously have to move an experienced one there because of the nature of that intersection, and move the newer guard who we'd be training to another area where she could work with an experienced guard till we get them up to snuff. Obviously, the statistics will be important. If we got a guard there, we would want to see the public use it so we could get enough people to generate, obviously, the rebate from the county at that guard. It's been very hard to do. I've done surveys, I think, the first 5 years I've been here, and they vary each year because, obviously, parents, for the reasons they've stated tonight, do not use the intersection, and we agree with them on that. We're ready to go. We look for your guidance and direction, but I think it's important you realize we do have standards that we follow, and we don't want to put their children in danger or our guard at danger going against the light.
Okay. Thank you. While you're up there, if you can just, I had one question that you probably got the best answer to, which is the hours that the crossing guards work. I'm assuming that this guard would work the same hours as at other intersections, or are there different hours for different intersections?
We based on what, there's so many different stops, and I've even learned about, I didn't realize that we had children that go and catch a bus down at the elementary school. I learned that tonight. There's, in a letter I got from the elementary school principal, I think is in your packet tonight, there's 100 kids that I was unaware of. Basically, at this point, we would try to figure out what the times are, and we would work the crossing for the times that these parents need. That's the way we do it.
Okay, so there's not any set time that...
Not right now, because
Okay.
I'd want to find out all the different school crossings, and then we'd set her up so they would be there through the whole period to get the middle school, the elementary school, and the high school. The whole idea of putting a guard there is we're there when the parents and the kids need us.
Okay, thank you.
I was just going to add, for budgetary purposes, we assumed a guard would be there 4 hours a day. We just need to work out what those hours are. but-
Okay, so if it's different, that would change the budget, but not that much?
Not that much.
Okay. That's all you have? Okay. I'll start out with a couple comments. I'll look for council colleagues' comments. It looks like some of the lights up here are working and some aren't, so we may be back to hand waving tonight, because nothing is lighting. So, let me just first say, I think that this is a wonderful proposal. It seems like the solution to a problem that has been ongoing for a long time. I think it's pretty much a no-brainer that we want to do this. I think the part of it that is going to be hard is getting the State Highway Administration to change how the timing works under the existing signaling system, or adding a different crosswalk or whatever it might be, because we are going to have to work with the State Highway Administration to do that. I think that adding the crossing guard and having somebody who is there addressing the problem and seeing firsthand how well it works or how well it doesn't work, and the need for the types of things that everybody has been talking about in terms of modifying how people cross that intersection, I think we'll be able to make a much better case to the State Highway Administration if we have a crossing guard there who says, this is still a problem. And I anticipate that that will be the case, but I would, assuming that we go ahead with this, I would encourage parents to, when the crossing guard is established there, to help us start to lay the groundwork to improve what I think is going to be the necessary thing to do to make that case to the State Highway Administration that we need to change how that works, along with the myriad other issues that we have about how traffic and people move through the junction, and that I know the Tacoma Junction Task Force has been grappling with for over a year. And we'll have their report on that issue and others in about a month. So that's my thoughts on it. I think we need to do this and get going on it, and it'll be a multi-stage process. So Councilmember Snipper and then Councilmember Diana-Scone.
Thank you, Mayor. I wholeheartedly support the proposal. I think the 11.5 cost estimate is very reasonable, given the safety issue, direct safety issue with our children. I think it's a great idea to fund this out of the speed camera fund. It seems like a perfect use for speed camera money. And I also appreciate staff's recognition that getting pedestrian counts will work better once we have the guard in place, so that we'll actually see kids crossing there, whereas if you did the pedestrian counts before that, there'd be hardly any kids, or many fewer kids crossing there. And I'll stop there. Thanks.
Councilmember Diana-Scone.
I'm not just in favor of it, I'm pretty passionate about it, because I've been on the Tacoma Junction Task Force, and this is something, it's not just a year, it's a year and a half, and this is something that we've discussed over and over again, based not only, based on a lot of our own experience, but also the experience of everyone who has children who live on the other side of Carroll Avenue. I just, I know everybody gets tired of me saying back in the day, but back in the day, there was not only a crossing guard there, but the street, the crosswalk was between the co-op and what we now call TJ's. It used to be, was Highs for a while, and before that it was the corner drugstore, and that was probably before a lot of you all were born. But there was indeed, once that light went in, there was a crossing guard for school-age children, and it went straight across. I don't know when the island hopping happened. That's what I call it. Probably sometime when B.Y. Morrison Park was developed, I think in the mid-'70s, maybe the mid-'80s. But I'd like to see us go back, and I think, and my suggestion, and maybe I'm not supposed to be suggesting that out loud right now, is maybe to have Mr. Cedric Ward come in and listen to your parents and read all. I decided tonight that the heaviest thing should get passed, because this is definitely the heaviest, all the comments from the community about putting a crossing guard there. Maybe he should listen. I think in the Junctions report, he says that he doesn't think that a single crosswalk would work. I think he has the wrong place in mind. He's up a little higher, across from the city lot, across to the Liberty Station. You need to move it. It's a wider place, but it needs to be moved down a little bit. It worked back in the day. I know there were less cars and they didn't drive as fast, but it still worked in those years. I'd also like to see if the city could shorten 90 days. When I count 90 days from now, we're at the end of the school year almost. I'd like to see if somehow, some way, some miracle could happen that we could shorten that hiring process. I don't know that that's possible, but I'd like to request that. And that's all. It is a no-brainer. It is definitely a no-brainer to go ahead and move forward on this to the best of our ability.
Councilmember Grimes?
Thank you. I also support the proposal, and like Kay, I've been looking at that area for a long time, both as a pedestrian who uses that crossing frequently enough to get to the co-op and other Tacoma Junction businesses, and also as a member of the Tacoma Junction Task Force. And like Councilmember Daniels-Cohen, I wonder about the 90 days. I assume a background check is needed, but that seems an awfully long time to take to recruit someone for a position like this, and I would invite your addressing that.
There's standard procedure that we follow when we advertise for a job. We have to put it out there for about a 3-week period. We put it out, it'll go out, if I get approval tonight, we'll put it out tomorrow and get it next week's Gazette, and several other local things that we use for advertising. We usually take a 3-week period, then we get the applications in, we process them, we then have interviews after we've gone through a processing stage, then we do background investigations, and we do final interviews. I have done it as close to 60 days, but that's pushing it. Obviously, we take the hiring of a crossing guard very serious. It's someone that deals with our children, so the process is in place. It's not that we're going to slow it as quickly as we get it, but we have to do a similar process. If we do it any different, the city could be liable for employment discrimination and many things that happens in that area. So there is a standard process. Obviously, I will do it as fast as possible to get somebody on stage so we can start.
So I wonder if, in order to get someone there faster, this is just a question for your response, whether you have police staff who could cover the intersection, perhaps not for 4 hours a day, but for less time. You might need to pay people overtime in order to do that. So is there a possibility of coverage within existing staff?
There is no, the only staff I could use would be taking people away from other jobs. We use our supervisors, is also our payroll clerk. She supervises the guards. Her and many of the other administrative, our records clerk, our NCIC clerk, all of them will fill in at times. To take them away would take them away from their tasks. To put a police officer there, there's no guarantee because of the way our schedules are and the way we handle calls. If you want to authorize overtime, we could look at it that way, but that'd be a tougher way to go. All I can say is I can try to do it in 60 days.
If I may follow up, is it possible to ask for support from Montgomery County? And if this position has been approved, that we could actually rent a crossing guard?
I could try. I mean, we've never done it before. When I was with the county, we never had requests. They're pretty tight with their crossing guards, too. And you know how tight their budget is right now, so I don't know if they have any extra they could loan us. We could try. If you authorize the money, I'll leave that.
No, I was just going to also add to the chief's comments. I would just remind the council that we currently have 2 police officers who are out on administrative leave because of their involvement in a fatal police shooting. So we're also down several officers for that reason. We also have 1 vacancy. So I think the chief, from a practical standpoint, is down 3 officers at this time. So that does create some limitations for him in terms of being able to staff.
Sometimes when officers are unable to perform police officer duties, they can still do other desk duty, and is crossing guard duty a possibility there?
We've got 2 that are strictly out on administrative leave, which I can't bring back.
Right.
We will be hiring, we've already sent the offer, but that officer will be going through a training period. The problem you have when you put an officer, unless it's an overtime detail, is that we don't know what calls are going to come in. And what happens, and it's happened throughout my career, when you tell an officer you've got a detail, let's say, to go to the crossing at the junction.
No, I was just talking about someone who wasn't able to be on the street as an officer.
No, right now, no, I have no one I could put there.
Thank you.
I want to put the person there as fast as you all want it, and I will do everything I can to expedite the hiring process.
Thank you.
Councilmember Mayo.
Yeah, I want to thank the city staff for putting together the proposal, which I also support. And I understand the 90-day period that it takes, and I would just urge parents to continue to do the good parenting you've been doing all along at this spot for 3 more months, and in hopes that 3 months from now we'll be able to get a crossing guard there. The other issue is that this, as we've identified, the crossing guard is only a piece of the puzzle of Tacoma Junction. Its crossing in stages is a problem that's caused by the light. I guess in respect to that issue, we should, and I would hope that citizens would continue to advocate with state highways, that ultimately if it comes to the people of Tacoma Park needing to rise up and try to work, our political power to get higher people in state government to do something, we should do that. And I could think of the power of asking the governor, we don't want an hour of your time, we don't want 15 minutes, we want 10 seconds. And how many people you could get in Tacoma Park to support the idea that 10 seconds longer at the crossing at Tacoma Junction would make a huge difference. So there are other ways besides through City Council and the city budget to try to make some improvements there. I hope that when the task force, the Junction Task Force, comes back with recommendations, we can spend some time specifically talking about pedestrian safety and accessibility movement through the junction, because I think at least that's certainly a priority for me, is the issue of pedestrian accessibility, ease of movement throughout the city, and this is a key spot. And then on the last issue of whether the crossing could be moved to a different part of the intersection, I guess the one thing that would concern me about moving the location of the crossing is that if you move it toward Old Town, you're requiring pedestrians to cross a bigger stretch of 4-lane, a 5-lane stretch of street, and the limited bit that I know about traffic safety suggests that that's a bad thing to put a pedestrian in the middle of a very large span. And so I would just urge, if we're going to look at something like that, we just get a professional to give us some advice on whether having someone cross 5 lanes of traffic, of open traffic, creates a greater risk or a lower risk. Imagine a child halfway through the street and cars are going through a red light. Which way do they run? What do they do? That's a more confusing issue than it is when you're only crossing, the 2 lanes of east-west or the 2 lanes of Carroll. But thank you.
Councilman? Okay, Councilmember Schultz.
I'm all in favor of this idea of a crossing guard. My concern reflects kind of what the chief was just talking about, is that I don't think one crossing guard is going to be able to handle it properly. It's certainly one crossing guard is far better than none, no question about that. But it seems to me that if you're going to maintain that crossing across the island that's created by the B.J. Morrison Park, you're really going to need two, because the way I picture it, you've got a crossing guard walking with a group of kids. They get to the island, they walk with a group of kids a little further across, and then they've got to come back. They get back over to the where they started, which means having to wait for a whole cycle of lights. And so while that person's in the middle of Carroll Avenue, what's to keep teenagers and others from romping across the street when the crossing guard's not in that section of the street? So what I see here is, what I kind of hope that this amounts to is kind of getting this crossing guard hired as quickly as we can, getting them on duty, but realizing we've got this Tacoma Junction Task Force report coming, and that's going to really be, as Howard Cohen was testifying, it's going to be the holistic look at the junction, with a hope that maybe in the process of coming up with a plan, we can create a direct crosswalk. If there has to be a median in the middle of that, of Ethan Allen Road, or whatever it has to be, a safety spot or something like that, who knows what it's going to be. It could be all kinds of solutions. But I think that a half a loaf here is far better than no loaf at all, and I'd absolutely support this idea.
Chief, can I just ask you, I believe you looked at whether it would need one guard or two. Did you have anything you want to share about that?
The staff, and my staff's behind me, and I recommended that if we cross it in 2 stages, we need one guard. We can do it with one guard. That's easy, 2 stages. If you're going to cross them in 2 stages, in 1 stage all the way across, you're going to go against the light. You're going to need 2 people. There's no way the guard can go from one part of the street all the way over when the light's changing. You're putting the guard at risk, you're putting the kids at risk. If we're going to cross them in 1 stage, you need 2 guards. If you cross them in 2 stages, which we recommend and is the safe way to go, 1 guard works.
So it sounds like if we do 1 guard for the moment with the existing lighting,
if we can get the light
push for the light change, and then that would probably necessitate a second one.
If we can get the light to where everyone here has spoken tonight, we can do it in 1 stage, and that's what we need to get to, and that's up to SHA. I think everybody in this room knows the problems we've had there.
So you're comfortable with, as we need to go forward now, with 1?
I can do 1, and everyone has to understand, until we get the light changed, it's going to be 2 stages.
Okay.
And we still need the people to cross because we need to justify everything. Don't boycott us because we can only do it in 2 stages. We want to help you get across, okay?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Councilmember Grimes, did you have something else?
This is premature because the direct crossing that we've discussed from the TPSS co-op area toward the former TJ's area wouldn't be something that could be considered immediately. It is something that various community members have been talking about for several years, including on the informal task force, informal working group that preceded the Tacoma Junction Task Force, and it's something I'd like to see. What I wanted to say right now is that I would not see that as moving the crosswalk. I would see it as an additional crosswalk. If you move the crosswalk, then you would get people crossing anyway from the TPSS co-op to the island by B.Y. Morrison Park, and from that island to where the former TJ's is. I would not remove that crosswalk nor the signaling. On the subject of the signaling, Cedric Ward from the State Highway Administration did tell us on the State Highway Administration that pedestrian signals would be needed for that additional crosswalk with some cost to be paid, whether by the State Highway Administration or some other source. So I just wanted to make clear that, at least in my mind, and I believe in many others, this would not be moving the crosswalk, it would be an additional one.
Thanks. Councilmember Danisco.
Yeah, that was what I was pushing for also, that we have the additional long crosswalk. And right now, and it may not be this moment, but there's a 13-second delay where all cars are stopped at the junction. Believe me, I've been there and seen it many times. Now, it may have shifted because I think State Highway's been up there noodling around with the, that's a technical term, it's only State Highway that says that, with the actual signals. But because I've seen the kids, I've also participated in taking the catty corner on the 13-second delay. The teenagers especially will go all the way across when all the cars are stopped. So, and it has nothing to do with the walk signal. It's just they're all stopped at all intersections at the same time. And we've talked to Cedric Ward about it. I think he's aware of it, and I just think he's a guy we need to get in here to really put some pressure on him to get us an extension so we can get people across the island, and with one crossing guard, at least for right now.
Okay, so it sounds like we're going to bring an item back next week and do whatever next week?
No. The budget amendment is in 2 weeks.
2 weeks.
This would be incorporated into that amendment that will be presented to you.
Okay.
Is it possible for you to start the search process without waiting for that?
Oh, that was my intention.
Thank you.
Okay, good. So we will do that. Okay. We will move to the next item, which is the discussion of the zoning text amendment regarding adding accessory commercial kitchens as a permitted land use in certain residential zones under certain circumstances. And
I'd like the privilege of introducing this.
sure, you want to
Yeah.
do that?
I'm the person who brought this to the council, and it was brought to me by residents of Tacoma Park and constituents of mine in particular, constituents from the Tacoma Park Presbyterian Church, which is in Ward 1, right around the corner from where I live. So I was approached about the commercial kitchen idea in the accessory building, let's call it the gym building of the church, several months ago. I had understood that residents rightly went directly to county council because a zoning change would be needed in order to operate a kitchen there. And so I spoke at some length on a number of occasions with Councilmember George Leventhal, who had the intention of introducing a zoning text amendment in county council. I spoke to people from the church, including Pastor Mark Reiner, and a variety of neighbors, which is easy because I live right there, and determined that this is something that I wanted to pursue, and realized, especially in talking to Councilmember Leventhal, that the support of the Tacoma Park City Council would be very helpful in getting this through the county council. Now, we understand that as proposed, the zoning text amendment would be a by right permission for churches to operate commercial kitchens, and that's anywhere in the county, rather than a special exception, which I assume Sarah Daines will address. And we understand also that Montgomery County Zoning Code allows a house in a residential neighborhood to be converted into a church by right. So this proposed CTA does have certain restrictions there. So that's all I have to say by way of introduction. I obviously, Sarah Daines wants to say something, and then Mayor Williams has graciously allowed me to invite Vicki Warren, one of the church elders, to speak on behalf of the church so that I don't have to. Thank you.
Ms. Daines. Yes, I'm sure you want to speak on this one.
I love coming before you guys and talking. Just to expand a little bit upon what Councilmember Grimes has indicated, the zoning text amendment would allow the establishment of a commercial kitchen, which is fairly broadly defined in the text amendment that's included in your agenda packet. It basically defines a commercial kitchen as any facility that satisfies the requirements or can be licensed as a kitchen for the preparation of food that could be sold to the public. The amendment also would allow for the establishment of commercial kitchens in a number of other facilities beyond just places of worship or churches. It could be included in certain residential facilities, small group homes, fire stations, cultural and public facilities, etc. It would not be allowed in buildings that
that housed home occupations, daycare facilities, and adult foster cares, or anything that requires a special exception. We have made a couple of recommendations that we would, we've offered some revisions that we would ask the council to consider as they discuss the proposed amendment. The first is an expansion of the definition of a commercial kitchen. Rather than leaving it sort of wide open, that it be amended to, I recognize that there are shared use or community kitchens, and as noted in the attachment that is, this is not numbered, but it's the fourth page of your packet from the back. It would establish a shared use community commercial kitchen as a kitchen where food could be sold to the public, and the primary purpose would be to offer one or more of the following services to the community. And it lists a variety of them there. The thought is that by linking it specifically to community-focused activities, which is the intent of the Presbyterian Church, that it makes it more specific to the type of activity that the City Council and the community as a whole are supportive of. We're also recommending that it be identified as a special exception rather than a permitted use, so that the community as a whole, again, would be able to comment on what impact the proposed kitchen may have on them as far as their home or other activities that might be in the immediate area. It's not an unusual process. If you were to establish an accessory apartment, for example, a bed and breakfast, a charitable or philanthropic use or office in a residential area, you would have to go through a special exception process. And admittedly, it's kind of involved, but it is something that, from our perspective, makes sense given the residential character of the neighborhoods that this activity would be included in. We're also recommending that there be size limitations placed on the size of the kitchen. Agreed, not every church is going to be rushing out there to go and establish a commercial kitchen or to do these activities, but the ordinance itself impacts all of the places of worship throughout the county, as well as these other types of buildings I've identified, some of which are 250,000 square feet in size, and 5% of 250,000 square feet is a really big kitchen. By establishing a limitation, creating it as a special exception rather than a by right permitted use, and more clearly defining the definition, or more clearly defining what a commercial kitchen is, we think that this would serve the purposes of the community in terms of the local food support, activities that were discussed earlier, as well as protecting the interests of the residents in the immediate neighborhood.
Okay. I think before we have questions, maybe if Councilmember Grimes wants to introduce the guest.
I would ask Vicki Ward, who is an elder of the Tacoma Park Presbyterian Church, to address the council with her perspective and the church's.
Thank you very much for this opportunity. This initiative arose out of a listening campaign that we had at the church about a year ago. It was a way that we decided to bring people together and also to really be responsive to our congregation. And what we heard from the congregation is they wanted our mission to be more locally involved. They wanted to address the needs of the community, both in helping to alleviate hunger and also to address economic inequalities in the community. Now, I was a member of the property committee, and I knew that we had a commercial kitchen that we had used for these purposes in the past. There had been some attempts to raise money during the years to bring it up to code, but they hadn't they weren't successful. So I took this on in August, and shortly after I took it on, I decided to look into some grants to raise money. And as I went down that road, I found out that for zoning reasons, we were not permitted to engage in microenterprise. And this is something that was very important to the congregation, but also the more research I did, the more I acquired, as you have heard, so many wonderful local partners. There was just such a need in the community and such enthusiasm for this kitchen, which isn't going to address all of the issues because it's only a 610 square foot facility. That being said, I heartily support Sarah's redefinition of the shared use community kitchen. I think that really helps hone in on exactly what we want to do. And I also have no objections to the space requirements. I understand from talking to the county council representatives that there are some neighborhoods that have churches that might not be as aligned with their neighbors as the churches in Tacoma Park are. And so I understand why they would want to put more limitations on the zoning text amendment. And I think that is the appropriate place to put those limitations. Requiring churches that are, well, at least churches such as ours, that are basically, we don't have full-time staff except for Pastor Mark. So we don't really have the kind of staff necessary to go through the special exception process or the expertise. It would be burdensome. I know for us it would be burdensome. And I also feel at this level, at the city council level, I'm not sure it's necessary to put that on. I guess we had kind of expected maybe at the county level this might happen, and it might be more appropriate at that level. I think what we had hoped at the city council level was that there would be an acknowledgement that in this community, churches are a part of it, that we want to be supportive and work with our neighbors. We did send out letters to all of our neighbors. We've gotten a couple, just recently we've gotten a couple concerns, which we addressed immediately. It didn't require a public hearing. It's just not the way that we need to find out what our neighbors need. And I've also talked to the 7 or 8 other churches that are in residential neighborhoods in Tacoma Park. They're at varying levels of ways that they've interacted with their communities, but I don't see that that pursuing a commercial kitchen option, it's a large-scale investment. Trust me when I tell you, it's not something that you can just go out and do. Even in our church that has the mechanical and the electrical and the plumbing facilities in place, it's going to require significant investment, and I don't see us recouping that investment financially. So it's not an economic endeavor. So it's something that we feel really strongly about as part of our mission, and the more we've pursued it, we've realized that in the community it's very necessary, and so we just want to keep working on it, and I welcome any questions you might have.
You might know the answer to the question that I was going to ask Ms. Daines. Do you know if anything has changed in terms of churches having kitchens in the past that are is that the code changed over time as to what you have to do to maintain kind of what you had to begin with, or have there been other more wholesale changes to how churches' kitchens are dealt with?
Well, what happened was, this is just my cursory investigation, okay? I didn't go out and do like a wholesale
You didn't do a professional investigation?
I didn't do a professional. I did the best I could. What I've learned is there's lots of things going on at varying levels. And there are churches that were engaged in some of the things that are now not permitted. And in 2004, a regulation was issued, mainly dealing with commercial kitchens, not so much with churches, but it did stipulate that churches could not let caterers use their kitchens, for commercial kitchens, for commercial purposes. Now, at the same time, there are churches in the community that did, during the past, run feeding programs out of kitchens that weren't even licensed commercial kitchens. So, I mean, there have been varying levels of things that have gone on in the past. And then there were churches that were in PG County, running certain kinds of operations. And then when that was incorporated into Montgomery County, the rules changed as well. And I'm not even sure everyone totally understands how to figure that out.
It should be made clear that a commercial kitchen in Montgomery County would be subject to licensure, both of the kitchen and of the individuals who are responsible for overseeing it.
Yes.
And that would entail regular, periodic, and sometimes, I believe, surprise inspections by
It's true.
Montgomery County health authorities. In other words, you have to build to code. You have to maintain the kitchen in a manner that includes all kinds of plans that are filed with the Montgomery County office. It's not an undertaking that anyone would take casually. And the health regulation from 2004 that Vicki Warren was referring to does make it clear that you cannot operate a residential kitchen, for instance, in a private home, as a commercial kitchen. It must be a distinct facility according to Montgomery County Code.
It has to be a separate facility. The other thing is that at all times, the person in charge of the kitchen who's working there has to be a certified food safety manager and has to have gone through an 18-hour course and passed a test. And it's relatively expensive even to get that certification. So one of the grants that we did get from you was to provide education to bring people up to that certified level.
Yeah, what I was trying to figure out was whether the changes over time have been the result of slow changes of kind of standards for kitchens, health-wise or that, or, the mechanical-wise, or whether it had been a change in approach toward zoning or other matters that had changed the status of kitchens.
I think it's more the latter, but your question is one that I have been pursuing. I've been trying to research the history of why the change came about, and I can't give you a definitive answer at this time. I've been given a number of answers on that question.
Okay. Councilmember Schultz.
I'm curious, is your church able to use your kitchen for its own internal purposes, like, say, a Shrove Tuesday pancake
Yes,
breakfast,
yes.
or if you have a bazaar?
Yes.
So it's appropriate for that?
Yes,
Oh,
we have
okay.
2 kitchens that we're actually allowed to use for that, both the commercial kitchen and the regular kitchen.
I see.
As I tell people, churches are allowed to prepare food on site for their members.
Right.
And there's no limits on this. I could actually prepare more product in my kitchen for the congregation than we're even attempting to do with the public. So I tell people we're allowed to poison our own, but there's very strict standards on preparing food in your kitchen for the public.
Okay. Thanks.
Councilmember Mayo.
I guess I would just like to say I hope that we can move this resolution forward and support it to the county. And in particular, I support the staff's recommendation of a definitional change and a square foot limitation. I guess I'd rather see the special exception left off the table for now and let the county, as they move through the process, try to resolve that. If Councilmember Grimes is willing to take whatever heat he'll get from neighbors and the churches, and we are, I support just keeping it as is and not using the special exception process.
I don't think that I said that I do oppose adding the special exception. There are a number of reasons for that. One, as Ms. Warren explained, the burden it puts on churches that I personally do not see as merited. This is a point where I'll bring in that I did poll the people in Ward 1, where the church is situated, and also I posted to my own Facebook page and so on to find out people's opinions. And these are the numbers that I got. 26 people were supportive without condition of this initiative of the Tacoma Park Presbyterian Church. 3 people were conditionally supportive. In other words, they said we need to make sure the logistics are handled right. And 1 person who lives 2 doors down was opposed, and he said that what set him off was this last Saturday someone parked and blocked his driveway. Unlikely that I will note that a kitchen user for a commercial kitchen would be there at a time. Well, I would think they would be there at weekdays during business hours and so on. So those were the numbers that I got. That includes every immediate neighbor who responded, was supportive. That includes Jill Feasley, who's president. It includes Heather Mazier, who lives across the street. And it includes Carolyn Alderson, who also lives across the street from the church. Several of the immediate neighbors didn't respond. One next-door neighbor was one of the people who was conditionally supportive because, again, noting the parking issues.
Councilmember Snipper.
Thank you, Mayor. I think this is a great idea, and I support it with the 3 staff recommendations. I just lived in Tacoma Park a long time. It's just hard for me to see Tacoma Park neighbors to something as large and major as this not wanting to weigh in. I just don't see that. Especially considering parking, odors, traffic, trash, et cetera, that folks have asked me about. So I think it's a great idea. I'd love to see the 3 changes incorporated into the zoning text amendment, including the special exception process part.
Councilmember Siemens.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm trying to keep track of the count here. I think what I've heard is that Councilmember Snipper accepts this with all of the staff recommendations. Councilmember Mayo was suggesting that maybe we not include the one council recommendation. And I think at this point I would concur with Councilmember Mayo. Thank you.
Councilmember Daniels-Cohen.
I'm going to also concur with Councilmember Mayo and Siemens. I definitely, it's a fabulous idea. It's having attended lots of Boy Scout pancake breakfasts there. Actually, having attended the church from year 1 from first grade to 12th grade. Before the building was built, that building wasn't built until the early 60s, where the kitchen is housed, I think. I definitely support, and I appreciate the staff's putting all this together, but I'd also like to let the county resolve the special exception, because I know it's a small staff, though it has a large congregation with great hearts. I'd like to see the county work that one out and have us not put that burden on you all.
Councilmember Schultz.
Yeah, I'd like to ask Sarah Daines a question, if I could. Sarah, in the attachment that you prepared, attachment A, when you talk about the primary purposes of which is to offer one or more of the following services to the community, and you enumerate 3 of them. Just for those who don't have it in front of them, one is rental space for the production of value-added food products for personal consumption or for sale. Second is business support for local food entrepreneurs. And third is food safety, food prep, nutrition, and other educational program. What is being excluded by creating that definition? What other things were you trying to not allow by creating this definition?
Trying to more clearly define what type of a kitchen the church is proposing to do, so that the definition more closely matches with their proposals as far as the microenterprise and the food-related activities. If it were to be left as a commercial kitchen now,
right.
It could be, they could, not that they would do this, but they could establish a commercial kitchen in the church and just rent it out to a caterer and have that be the sole user and the sole beneficiary of that particular
good.
kitchen.
That was what I was thinking you were getting at, but I wanted to be sure about it. Let me sort of explain where I'm coming from on this, but first let me just say that I spent a lot of time looking at this and trying to understand what its ramifications are. And I absolutely, totally, wholeheartedly support what the Tacoma Food Network is trying to do and what the church, the Presbyterian churches are trying to accomplish, and the reasons they want to do it, and the testimony that was given earlier by all the people in the public session, I thought was right on. My concern is that in Ward 6, we have a church that is very much struggling to survive, and it has taken to using its building. Well, according to reports that I've received from the police department, the congregation of that church has been there for a very long time, has shrunk to the point where it's not really able to support itself by its members, and in a good Christian way, it's rented out, it's hauled to other congregations, and so it's got a lot of congregations, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But what the church has also done is started to rent out its space, including its kitchen and the seating area, which I gather is pretty large, to any and all takers who want to use that basically as a rental facility. And recently, according to the police department, it was rented out for a wedding shower, which began at midnight, 12 a.m., I guess is the correct, and went on until it was broken up by the police around 3:30 a.m. in the morning. It took the entire force of the Montgomery County Silver Spring District to bring the party under control, according to the Tacoma Park Police Department. Its own staff was not able to do it. There were altercations with the police, and a number of arrests. People were taken into custody. And we've talked to the police department about it, and we've been trying to get in touch with the owners, the pastor of the church, who's been somewhat elusive. And I don't mean to imply that he's trying to do this or trying to avoid contact. I don't want to impugn anybody here because I'm not part of the justice system. All I know is that the neighbors in that neighborhood have been suffering for a long time, and would that this were the only incident, because they've had people block their driveways and actually wreck cars that were sitting in their driveways, and lots of trash coming out. So with this in mind, and understanding that this is an example that not all churches are Tacoma Presbyterian Church. There's an awful lot of them across the county. I don't live in Ward 1. I don't live next to the Tacoma Presbyterian Church, and I'm just glad that they're willing to do this. And there's probably plenty of other churches that would welcome the opportunity to do such an altruistic thing. But there's going to be some churches, inevitably, who are going to see this as a money-making proposition. A heck of a lot easier than, say, it's trying to run a daycare center where you've got to run through more hoops than you do if you're trying to start a commercial kitchen. So with that perspective in mind, I'm wholly supportive of the staff's three recommendations here of altering the definition, of limiting the size, and of requiring a special exception. Churches have to get a special exception in Montgomery County to have a daycare facility, and many, many do, and it's a wonderful thing for churches to do. It's wonderful because they can use facilities that might otherwise sit fairly dormant for a better part of a week. So if churches can get a special exception to run a child care center, it shouldn't be that difficult to get a special exception in terms of cost and time to get a commercial kitchen installed. Now, obviously, child care, if they prepare their own food, then they've got to deal with the health and regulations just the same as a commercial kitchen does. So obviously, I think I agree with the comments here tonight that probably not many churches in the county are going to take advantage of this thing. But nevertheless, I do think a special exception is really important, because if you, give you another reason, and that is if you have a church that does abuse this privilege, notwithstanding surprise inspections by food inspectors or something like that, and starts to, let anybody get in there and use that kitchen in order for them to make money, then you have a tool to keep them from doing it. You can take the special exception away. But if it's just a permitted use, without any special exceptions or special privileges that are granted by the zoning board, then you don't really have any tool in which to control some church that allows it to be abused because either they're just not paying attention or they're actually trying to make some money off of the thing. So I will support this with the special exception component in it. I won't support it without, but I would also remind people that it isn't the city of Tacoma Park that decides special exceptions. We can sit up here and all vote unanimously for special exceptions, and if the Montgomery County Council doesn't see fit to do it that way, that's where the decision's going to be made, not here. This is going to end up being purely advisory to our county council members.
One more
Go ahead.
comment or question for Sarah. As the county moves forward with its zoning changes and simplification, how would something like this be affected by those changes? Would it get potentially rolled into a new zone, new definition, or?
It could potentially be included in a new definition or a new zoning type.
Okay.
But whatever happens, we will work with the county to make sure that it is included or incorporated in some fashion.
And I have a question for you. On the special exception process, are there different special exception processes depending on the type of exception being asked, or is it just all one big process with the same costs for everybody, whether it's a big deal or a little deal?
I'm so glad you asked, because I printed this out and I've actually been reading it. I don't know the answer to that question because there is a long list. There are 12 items that need to be included with the application. But then the introduction says pertinent information. So some of the things like survey plats, exterior architectural drawings, forest conservation plan, for example, from my perspective, wouldn't necessarily need to be included in an application for an interior commercial kitchen. But it might be, depending upon whoever is accepting the application is interpreting it. The number of items that need to be included can be overwhelming. Several of them have a cost associated with them, and so I can understand the church's position regarding that. But it's my understanding that anyone who goes through and does a special exception has to fill out the same application form.
Okay, thanks. It's the county council that gets to decide this. I'm not sure how the county is going to end up dealing with questions like this in the new zoning laws that are going to be coming that we had the briefing on 2 weeks ago. And I like all of the staff suggestions. And the reason that I like the special exception suggestion is that I think about, in this particular, I'm trying to think about, it's like, let me back up a second. Given that we're sending something along to the county council to give our input on what they're considering, we can say whatever we want. I'm trying to think about how I would deal with it if I were the county council and having to make the decision, and thinking about if, let's say, we in Tacoma Park were dealing with the zoning text amendment as proposed by Councilmember Leventhal. It had been put into effect or was being considered to be put into effect, and a church somewhere in the rest of the county that falls under this Planning and Zoning Authority of Park and Planning. Say, for instance, Potomac, a church said, we want to do something, and it was a different proposal in a different way, but it was still to use the commercial kitchen in a church. And it got done and set a precedent, and other churches said, we want to do that too. And the idea came to Tacoma Park, and people in the neighborhood didn't like what the idea was. And they said, but we have to be able to do something to deal with this to get our input, and we would have to say to them, you don't get any input, it's by right, it can just happen. And I feel that we in Tacoma Park bend over backward to try and make sure that people get input into what is going to affect them in their neighborhoods. And the special exception process opens the possibility for that. If it's a by right development, they're precluded from that. So I come down on liking all of staff's recommendations. However, I feel like in terms of what I've been hearing from my colleagues up here, it sounds like there are 4 people who want to go ahead with the this as drafted, and so if that's the way we want to proceed, that's what would come back to us. Councilmember Grimes.
There's a bit of a, let's call it a procedural problem here, a challenge maybe is a better word. The timing, the County Council will be having a hearing on January 24th. I plan to attend and testify. Then it is already scheduled for the Fed Committee, whose members are Mark Elrich, George Leventhal, and Nancy Florine, to discuss on January 30th. I'm quite happy to suggest the changes that are recommended by staff to Councilmember Leventhal, but 2 of the 3 changes have already been suggested to him, changing it to an SE and putting a size restriction, and he rejected them both. I don't mean to sound abrupt with the word rejected, but he said they're not necessary, and that he didn't see potential for a lot of opposition. Really, he hasn't heard about any opposition from anyone anywhere else. Maybe they haven't noticed this, who knows. But in any case, well, it's not improbable. In any case, 2 of the 3 rejections were suggested to him. Frankly, honestly, I'm in a political bind that I do not want to undercut Councilmember Leventhal and his proposal. I would like to bring not just a series of suggestions to the County Council, but a voice of support. I do have meetings scheduled for Thursday with Council Members Irvin and Florine. As I mentioned, Councilmember Florine is one of 3, along with George Leventhal and Mark Elrich on the committee that will handle this. I guess I would prefer to discuss these changes further with the County Council members and then consult the City Council members regarding what I hear prior to bringing forth a final version of a resolution if we go forward as scheduled at our next meeting next Monday evening. I would ask that we have Jill Feasley, who's here in the audience, speak very briefly to address one point that has been raised in our discussion.
Sure.
I believe you told me you've never come to a council meeting before,
It's really shocking and shameful.
and you're a former Democratic precinct captain, I believe.
Okay, let me hang my head in shame. I come before you with a couple different aprons on, as I've described it. I live on the block where the commercial kitchen is being proposed. I am a member of the church and helping get this community kitchen concept off the ground. And I also am the director of Meals on Wheels of Tacoma Park, which operates a commercial kitchen out of Zion Lutheran Church, which I believe is the church that you mentioned before. On that specific point, I would like to note that the church rents out its facility, but not my commercial kitchen. And so the wild celebrations that happen are happening even in a building that already has a commercial kitchen in it. But I think that there are ways to address the issues that have been raised by that building that don't really relate to the use of a commercial kitchen. Sound, noise regulations, the issues of garbage and so forth. But I think that if a church is going to go ahead and allow a commercial kitchen, a community kitchen, it's a big investment of their money. And that, to be able to take away the possibility to use that space, those facilities, what do I want to say, is one that makes all parties involved want to have a good outcome. And so I think that the issues that might be generated in terms of traffic, parking, odors, and so forth can be addressed and should be.
It's very important to note that Zion Evangelical Lutheran Church is located in the Prince George's annexation part of Tacoma Park. My understanding is that that church has operated continuously for 40 years. There is nothing, and I researched this, in Prince George's County zoning code that precludes the operation of a commercial kitchen in a church. Therefore, this use of the kitchen was grandfathered into Montgomery County zoning code explicitly when the portion of Prince George's County was annexed to Montgomery County.
Right. The commercial kitchen has been there for 40 years. The church has been there longer.
All right. Thank you.
Bruce, one more comment?
Yeah.
This zoning text amendment could have moved forward without the City Council of Tacoma Park ever knowing about it. And I'm assuming the church brought it to our attention because you wanted our help. And so I'm really cognizant of the fact that we don't want to make you regret that choice. So I'd rather have us move something forward that is something that is going to be helpful, or not move something at all, and let the church and its advocates and the community advocates who want to do so speak at the county if that's the approach, rather than put something out there that would be unhelpful.
Can I just address that?
I
I
would
really
love that.
appreciate that, and I do concur. If we can't have support that's going to help move us forward at this level, I think it would be better not to add a burden that the county council might not add. Not that we don't want to have neighbors weigh in, but even in the case of the church that had those parties, those are not precluded by zoning. They can still have those parties regardless of having a commercial kitchen or not. And in terms of violations of commercial kitchens, it's not just zoning that can shut it down. The permitting department that gives you the permit to run a commercial kitchen can also shut down a commercial kitchen for any reason. That we operate outside hours, that they can just do an inspection and shut it down. So I agree that if we're not going to move forward with something that's not going to encumber us, that we would probably just want to move forward, with the advocates and the church.
So, do we want to continue to talk to county council members? Councilmember Grimes is going to meet with them.
As I said, I would propose to further consult the county council members about this. This is a county zoning text amendment. Vicki Warren got at the gist of this, that I agree it would be better not to go with a resolution that conditions our support. I think maybe a compromise, I'm not sure that all the council members would agree to this, would be to suggest those changes, but to express unconditional support for the zoning text amendment as the county council chooses to enact it. I realize that might be problematical for some. But as I said, I think we can do some offline exchanges, out of the council meeting exchanges, after I have further discussions, if that's all right with the other council members.
And I think, I just want to say on behalf of all of us that we are very supportive of what you're trying to do, the mission and the in this particular instance, it's a great idea, it's a great thing, and we want to be as supportive as possible, and we just understand some of the difficulties that the county council may face in trying to make it happen.
I guess it's not clear. We identified 4 through support for moving forward with a resolution by voice as we went around the table that had recommendations on 2 of the changes. And so it's not clear to me why we wouldn't just put either a whereas or a therefore in the proposed resolution that would say, whereas we encourage the county to also look at whether a square foot limitation or as a square foot limitation or an adjustment to the definition that would further narrow the purposes around community use could be valuable, whereas, I don't know why we wouldn't just move forward with that.
Yeah, because I would think we would want to move forward with something as supportive as we can be.
And that would not be, it would be a fairly soft way to...
Yeah, we're fine with the change in the definition and the square footage.
Again, I said this a moment ago, but I'll say it again. The concern is that we would express conditional support. Are we proposing to express conditional support only if they make those changes? Will we support it?
No.
So we suggest those changes. Yes. Okay. I did try to capture that in the draft of the resolution that's in the packets. It has 2 therefore clauses. One says we support the ZTA, and the second says we support something abstract, like we support mechanisms that would allow other approaches in any case.
Councilmember Schultz.
I would just lend my support to Councilmember Grimes and encourage his conversations, because there's an awful lot you can accomplish out of the public eye when you have these kind of relaxed conversations with council members to sort of explore ideas that may in fact be beneficial to those listening to them. Ms. Florine or Mr. Elrich as well, because it's going to be their decision. And so, for example, if the 3 of those who are on the Fed committee were to be aware that the city was 100% in support of this, but had some concerns, but only those concerns, and that they were easily resolved by some action on the part of the council, then that would be very freeing for them to know that this is something that they want to go ahead and support with some conditions. And obviously, if a special exception turned out to be what they, in their infinite wisdom, decided to do, they would know that, by golly, the city of Tacoma Park was going to be fully supporting any special exception that the church would want to provide.
Okay, so we will...
Is that all clear, Bob?
I need to know, do you want to amend or revise the resolution to incorporate the changes that were proposed by Councilmember Mall, or do you want to mail, or do you just want to leave it alone? Do you want it on the agenda for the 23rd in time for the public hearing on the 24th, or...
I think we leave the resolution as it is without the staff recommendations, and Councilmember Grimes is going to handle those offline with the county council members to suggest those as enhancements that they could consider.
Okay, so on January 23rd.
I'm happy to support that.
Okay.
I think we'll leave it that way for now.
Okay, so this will be on the agenda on the 23rd, approving the resolution as included in your agenda.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
And we'll take a short break.
Thank you.
legislative priorities. Deputy City Manager Ludlow.
Thank you. I'm going to try to go through this relatively quickly this evening. The first thing I want to note is I dropped a pile of paper at your desk, at your places.
Somebody's been doing that a lot this evening.
Well, I'm not doing this again. This is a one-time thing of showing a variety of the kinds of bills that we get in over the course of the week or so that have been directed to us for attention. A couple of them I might refer to, but I wanted to give you a sense of the kind of information that comes in. And so even though you'll be going through identifying what your priorities are, there's also a number of items that are directed towards employers that we have to review, or it may be more appropriate for a department or a particular subject area. We let the staff people get a sense, is that something we should weigh in on? If so, we bring that to you to advise you about that. And there's several things in here dealing with legislators. For example, basically identifying that, well, you might have a proposal that while you may have free speech to say some things in public, if it does implicate you in bribery or some other kinds of things, that they could actually use that against you. That's one of the proposals that's here. So there's a variety of things for you to look at another time, but I wanted to give you a sense of the kinds of things, as I said, that are directed towards me in the city out of all of the hundreds and hundreds of bills that come through, and many of which I would bring to your attention. In the future, if there's something of interest, I'll link to it on the website, so you just go to that. What I'd like to go through tonight is a list in your package of different kinds of issues that have been brought up that you may want to weigh in on for this legislative session, which just started last week, goes until April. And I'll go through them briefly. I also have a couple of additional ones. What I'd like from you tonight is if there's some other items that need to be added to this list that you would like to discuss in the future or think about, please let me know. If there's some of the things on the list that you don't think that you're going to care about at all, and everybody agrees to that, that's fine. What I'd like to do is then take a list of a variety of issues, transmit it to you by email for you to kind of weigh in your weighting of how important those various items are. That gives me a chance to group that, get it back to you, and we can discuss it, just kind of confirm it at a future meeting. If there are bills, topics that the council's not taken a position on in the past that you want to, then we would need to put that forward as a resolution before we can go through and lobby on it. The items that I had here, there's some that are pretty, I think, slam dunks. Lobbying for highway user revenue tends to be an important one for municipalities in Maryland. Similarly, protect and increase police aid and other municipal revenue sources. One of the things that has come up a couple years, and I have in this package that at your place, is last year's bill related to removing the exemption of banks from payment of personal property taxes. We have the pursue approval of our bill to add off-sale privileges to the Class B on-sale alcoholic beverage licenses available in Tacoma Park. And I would note that on next Monday night, there will actually be a work session discussion on that in Annapolis by the Montgomery County delegation. I'm working to find out if I need to be there. Michelle's double-checking on that. So while you're meeting, I may be there. We had the topic that we testified on in the public hearings before the Montgomery delegation, pursuing an amendment to the bills related to solicitation of money or donations from occupants of vehicles so that we protect our right to prohibit that kind of solicitation. We have some language that we would like to propose to Jamie Raskin's office to amend his bill from our attorney. One of the things that you communicated to me is perhaps taking up the encouraging establishment of community food waste composting facilities. It may be something that doesn't necessarily require state legislation. There may be some other ways to pursue that as well. So just let you know that. The encouraging the development of regulations related to standalone emergency room facilities. Heard a couple cautionary notes on this one, although we've been pushing for that very hard. Right now, the Maryland Healthcare Commission is considering the Washington Adventist Hospital Certificate of Need application, and so we probably wouldn't want to annoy them. To say, gee, we would like you to do this other work. And as much as we would like them to do that work, my recommendation is that we not move forward on state legislation related to that. Nevertheless, that has been something that maybe in some other ways we can continue to push on. There was the request to support Senator Raskin's joint resolution to call on Congress to pass a constitutional amendment reversing the Supreme Court's decision proclaiming that private corporations have a First Amendment right to spend unlimited amounts of money. We've traditionally supported funding of bus rapid transit, and this has been something that the planning staff have been encouraging more support on as it might relate to improvements along New Hampshire Avenue. Support funding of bike share facilities, which there is a major effort for in Montgomery County. Generally supporting New Hampshire Avenue redevelopment efforts. And what this may entail is our lobbyist is looking for other communities, and so is our staff, looking for other communities across Maryland that may have similar kinds of efforts underway that we could find a way to partner. So it's not just Tacoma Park wants this, or some other kind of a special source for us, but maybe there's a program that would affect 3 or 4 municipalities or areas across the state that then we would have more leverage with more legislators in order to get some funds. We've traditionally supported the Purple Line. We've traditionally supported same-sex marriage, and that's going to be a major issue before the state legislature this year. We put forward as one of the original proposals on our legislative action request for the Maryland Municipal League, improving the reliability and responsibility of utility companies. And this isn't just in trying to keep power on, but it's on things like removing telephone poles when they need to be removed and they've already been replaced, removing the dead lines that lie across. I have a neighbor that still has a power line across their front lawn, and nobody will come and take it away. So there's a variety of things that we outlined in the legislative action request related to that. We had asked to permit smaller signs on state highways in certain areas. There was also a question that was raised to me today. In our support, I guess our presumed support for more highway user revenue, the proposal that is before the state legislature is to use an increase in gas tax to help that fund. The council may or may not want to take a position as to whether it's a good idea to raise the gas tax. In the past, we've kind of played soft on where the revenue should come from, kind of leaving that up to the legislators to work out. But when somebody had asked me, well, is the council supporting an increase in the gas tax? And I didn't have an answer for that. So that may be something that you may want to take a position on or may choose not to. The other thing was that the mayor forwarded me a request from Delegate Al Carr to support the purchase of streetlight bill that he had put forward last year that he wants to put forward again this year.
And that last year's bill is in the packet that Cindy passed out.
That's right. I put that near the end, I believe.
HB 905.
So I will open it to you if there are other items that you want on this list, or if there's a particular thing that you want to say about this that gives some direction as to general priorities for this year. It's very helpful for me. And in addition, I'm writing a newsletter article that Jenny wants tomorrow that might give a hint about what your priorities are. So if you can come up with something tonight, that's fine. If not, we'll work through the emails and get that over the next week or so.
Councilmember Snipper.
Thank you, Mayor. I really appreciate your putting this together. It takes a lot of work to do this because we've wandered all over. And in looking over the list of these resolutions, I was quite impressed with the wide variety.
It's fun, actually, to put. It was fun putting it together.
I bet it was interesting. A little bit of history for those who've been around a long time. I actually support all of the ones you've listed, and I do want to encourage the establishment of the community food waste composting facilities, and I do support Senator Raskin's joint resolution, and the gas tax and the purchase of streetlights, the two additional ones. I do want to ask a little clarification on the, I'll call it the WA issue. I really would like to encourage the development of regulations related to standalone emergency room facilities, and I do understand I don't want to antagonize the commission at this point. We've already irritated WA, so I don't care about them, but the commission. So there's kind of a timing issue. Maybe we should be circumspect before they issue their decision and then full bore afterward or some such thing. I don't know exactly. That's sort of my question, is asking for a little strategizing.
There was state legislation, I think, 2 years ago.
Right, that's what I remembered.
Delegating saying that that the state should have these standalone emergency facilities and that the commission should write the regulations for that. And it has been in limbo pretty much since that time.
It is pretty, I understand why it's complicated. The ACA, the Health Reform Act, has added some additional complications to all of this, too. And of course, they're busy working on some of those provisions, so I can understand why this has gotten to a back burner, but it is important for our community.
One of the things, I've not had a lot of time to talk about it. It may be something that we can talk with the commission staff just to feel them out a little bit about that, with their, if there's some issues related, some problems that we may help facilitate figuring out. We've not done that. Perhaps that's our first step, and then I can get back to you on that.
Great, thank you.
Councilmember Grimes.
Thank you. Yes, I also generally support just about everything on the list. So I'll focus on just a few things, including one that I think I would love to see more explicit, not this year, but I'll mention it now because we're talking about this now, and then another that's not really on the list. But first, one precision, encourage establishment of community food waste composting facilities. In particular, Councilmember Mail had suggested encouraging the state to expedite the creation of health, I think it was, regulations that would enable facilities to operate, noting particularly that the state shut down a facility just a few weeks ago. So this could be very specifically create the regulatory apparatus for the operation of these facilities, because we know there are operators out there who are interested in hosting them. The third item is protect and increase other municipal revenue sources. I would love to see explicitly in here at some point, and I think not this year, specific items. For instance, and this is a very steep hill to climb, but a increase in the 17% cap on the municipal share of locally designated state income taxes that may go to municipalities. We would be fighting against the entities that receive the other 83% there. But it's something I think that you have to start, and sometimes you ask for a bunch of things and you get a concession on some of them, and why not this one? And it's part of a revenue picture. There's some other stuff that goes along with that, getting a municipal share of certain excise and usage taxes. I'm sorry, I can't remember exactly what they were at this point, something related to hotels and motels. Then the last thing I'll mention is we do have here support for funding of bus rapid transit, Purple Line, and so on. There is an existing agency, WMATA, that operates buses and rails that is starved for funding, both capital and operational funding, and frankly, doing better with the existing transit agency is a higher priority, I would think, than creating something new, like bus rapid transit. That's arguable, it's discussable, but given that these other things are in there, I would like to see support for WMATA operational and capital funding.
And actually, I think we've had that in the past, so I appreciate that, too. But
of course,
I
WMATA is
understand
funded by Virginia, Maryland, and the district, as well as the federal government.
And Virginia is usually late and $1 short on providing their portion and so on, and we do have Kathy Porter on WMATA now, which is an extra little boost.
Councilmember Schultz.
Susie, it was reported in the paper, I guess in the last day or two, it was a reference, I guess, Sunday perhaps, post referencing the governor's idea of transferring from the state to the counties the funding of pension systems. And in that article, he was quoted to saying that in order to accomplish this, in other words, to get the Assembly to accept it, he might have to figure out ways to give local counties additional methods of raising funds, in other words, taxation. Of course, given the fact that we have as a municipality no means of doing that other than trying to raise our property tax, which we don't even get to collect, it goes to the county and we pray they give it back to us. Do you have has there been any feedback or any gossip as to what the governor might be surmising?
I don't know. I'll follow up on that with Michelle. She usually hears those kinds of things. Clearly, it is one of the big elephants that the state legislature is dealing with. The counties are absolutely petrified that they'll have to pick up those funds, and they kind of bought a couple years. That was going to go through a couple years ago. They bought a little bit of time. I think there is some merit to the understanding that the pension accounts won't really be kept under control until the people who are charged with keeping them under control actually have to pay them. But that's a tough one. Now, giving counties more ways to make money, I don't know that that's been the problem. I'd love to, if they do that, make sure that municipalities get those same options.
That was my thinking.
Let me find out and see if they're, both with Melanie Wenger, who represents Montgomery County as a lobbyist, and Michelle, and see if what they've heard and if there might be some ways to structure something that could come our way.
Because if there's a pie to be sliced, even a little slice would make
mean a lot to us, right?
To MML and Tacoma Park.
And if I can just add a quick comment that over the last few years, as I've been involved with the MML Legislative Committee, there have been discussions and various efforts to request of the state legislature the ability for, enabling legislation for the municipal governments to be able to have other taxing authorities, and pointing out to them that it isn't what it always seems like they feel it is, which is they'll get blamed for raising taxes. It's no, give us the ability to do that if it fits in our community. We can't do it without the permission from the state. So there have been a number of efforts to try and push for that, and there has been pushback.
Well, if the governor wants his pension thing bad enough, who knows what the earthquake might create, you know?
Right.
Fallout, whatever.
Thank you.
Councilmember Mayo.
Yeah, a couple of comments. The street lighting bill and the bank tax exemption issue, those would at least be priorities for me, and I'm hoping we could follow up on them if they come up again this session, as I expect that's why they're in our packet. On the issue of the food waste facility, I do think the comments earlier are correct that, potentially there's a way to try to get direction established in the appropriations bill for the relevant agency or other softer ways beyond legislation to try to make something happen, but I think that's probably an area where staff could provide education about this issue to key people in Annapolis, and that could make progress happen a lot faster.
Okay.
And then, I guess just a general question about this list of items. Are we better off identifying specific bills or resolutions, or just general areas? So, for example, Senator Raskin's joint resolution, I'm happy to support that, but, equally happy to support, any resolution that
says that
improves, campaign finance law that makes it less corrupt. That would be a general field that potentially would give you more discretion. I don't know if that's valuable or not, so it's really just a question.
Generally, it is helpful to be a little broader because multiple proposals come up. It's nice to not have to come back to you to say, well, you said this, but this one has this other provision. What do you think? Unless there's real significant change. So it's fine to say an example is, or for that reason we support, but a broader general statement is very helpful.
And it'll also be the case that during the session, as we have legislative updates, there will be particular bills that will come up that we'll then potentially take a position on.
Right. Thanks.
I wanted to say a thing or two. Councilmember Schultz wants another crack at it, and Councilmember Siemens as well. So I'll let second crack go after first crack. I think we should do whatever we need to have the broader council support for the ones that we haven't taken positions on. So I like Councilmember Mayo's approach on the campaign funding and also on the community food waste composting facilities, however that can be broadly done.
I'll have to find out something about that.
And I don't think we need any additional position taking on Delegate Carr's streetlight bill because we've already got that. And so it's just to...
I'm just adding it into the list so when you do some ranking and prioritizing.
And I've had a number of discussions about whether the city has taken a position or whether I've taken a position on the gas tax. There was a delegate at the Carroll County legislative dinner who thought that I said that MML had taken a position in favor of the gas tax, which I had not said. So there was about 24 hours of major kerfuffle about whether MML had taken that position. And what I've told people down there is I think that it makes sense to increase the gas tax, that in the long run it's going to have to be something else because the gas tax is going to be less of a source as we move away from fuel oils and gases for energy sources, and that people are already exploring other ways to do the similar taxing as it moves to other ways to supply energy. But in the meantime, it's what we've got, and people talk about, well, now is not the time to do it because the price of gasoline is so high and people are in tough shape in the economy. And I say, yeah, but maybe it's precisely the time to do it because it's so high, the price of gas can change 15 cents in a day just from market forces, and people don't even notice. And why not just capture it with the tax and do what's needed? And the way that it comes back that can affect us is that people are looking for support for raising the gas tax and holding out the carrot of, well, that's the only way that you municipalities are going to get your highway user revenues back is if there's more money in there, and then that turns around into, yes, but then you have to, put it in the lockbox and say that you can't take it again, and we know that the leadership in the Senate and the House have said they're not going to put it in a lockbox, but they're going to look at other methods for making it harder to take, so that there's a lot of back and forth on the politics of the support for the gas tax and kind of what that'll buy you. But I think my position is that I would like to see us come out in support of raising the gas tax so that we can kind of help bargain for what we might get. Councilmember Siemens.
I just want to say that I have some specific language I would like to propose for the support of Senator Raskin's bill.
Please send it. I
Send it on.
love people's suggested language, so that's fine.
Thank you.
Saves the deputy city manager from having to come up with the language.
That's right.
Councilmember Schultz.
I would just say, yes. Thank you. My assistant over here. Assistant button pusher. I mean, I would want us, with regard to the Senator Raskin's proposal for the city to get out as early out of the starting blocks on supporting that as possible, because I think it's something that people would expect Tacoma Park to do. Because I do think that if we did a referendum in Tacoma Park, we would have 100% support for that constitutional amendment. But the other question I wanted to ask about was the off-sale privileges for Class B. Last council spent an awful lot of time last year preparing, as you know, better than anybody, trying to get that legislation through, and we stuck by our guns on that. And we said, well, if it gets turned down in this particular year, which was last session, we'll be back next year. I'd like us to be good to our word on that. Doesn't necessarily mean we have to come back with the exact same thing. I think there was some conversation about how it could be amended to make it palatable to to those who had raised objections to it, and I'm just wondering if we can move in that direction so that we can bring this back. It just seems odd that we would not do so after having made such a strong effort last year.
Right. At this point, the bill that's before them is an amended version, which anticipates us working out some kind of an agreement with the Montgomery County Board of License Commissioners with a sunset provision in case that does not work. So that's the direction that I have at this time from the council. I think that's probably not going to get anybody upset at the state, because, it doesn't include the provisions, at least it doesn't explicitly talk about the council's role in that. And that discussion about the council's role is more a conversation with Montgomery County. I think we're going to get that into the mix, but I haven't seen the language yet about what kind of agreement we can have with Montgomery County, and so that's on my tickler that I need to follow up with the folks at the county and see, what makes sense to make that work, because otherwise we'll need to go back and change it.
Well, is there somebody at the county who's
Yes,
trying to do that?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
She's trying.
I'm very trying.
Okay. Yes, you can be trying.
I'm pretty much going along with what everybody else said. The payment of personal property taxes, exemption of banks, I'd like to see that definitely removed. It says, remove the exemption of banks from payment of personal property tax. I think they ought to pay them.
I don't know that that is going to be reintroduced this year.
Okay.
I don't know that it's not, though. I mean,
Yeah,
I've
it's
I've
here.
heard...
The introducer there likes to do things as late as he possibly can, generally.
There has been some interest in having another entity introduce it, and I think that's where the discussion's coming.
And again, also supporting Senator Raskin's joint resolution. I was personally shocked when that Supreme Court did what they did there. And I know we've talked about, of course, the food waste, community food waste composting facilities, but the bike share facilities also. Bike share is, I think, the way to go, and just supporting the funding is important. It gets it out into the public eye. Riding a bike is good for your health.
Unless you take a tumble.
Yes, yes.
Anything else? Okay, so any additional information, get that to the Deputy City Manager.
Please do.
And she will continue to refine this, and we'll have a couple items coming back to us for action. All right, then we move to our final item for the evening, which was postponed from our agenda last week, which is the discussion of a resolution regarding process for sidewalk requests and installation.
Daryl and I did our best at identifying what the former council had proposed, and that has been before you. It's really not come back to say, to even the old council to say, yes, this is what we meant. So now as a new council, you get to see if this is what you meant. And we do have attached Councilmember Mayo's comments and improvements on it. At this point, I think we can just leave it open to you about what should we do with this.
And I have a question on Councilmember Mayo's proposals, and I just wanted to get a general answer on that, which is the last comment about whether the changes would be large enough to require council approval when it came to the phase for the design. Is that something that would necessarily come back to the council, or I'm assuming that it might have just been that there's money in the budget, and therefore those pieces wouldn't come back?
That was the concept, I believe, at the time, that there would be a kind of, you would have a pot of money for design, and then it would come out of that. But
In addition to that, we also have gotten approval for use of 3 engineering firms for design, so we don't come back to the council. You've already approved their use for approved projects, so we don't come back with first a single reading ordinance awarding a contract for the firm. We already have those firms on board. It's kind of part of an indefinite quantities type of rolling contract that lasts the life of their contract, and we renew it annually.
And I strike the need for that comment, for that change.
Councilmember Snipper and then Councilmember Daniels-Cohn.
I support Councilmember Mayo's proposed changes with one disagreement, I guess. So the process is to, what we spent the most time is number 2, the process for when the community is requesting it. And I noticed that nobody's argued about the 50% level, but anyway, I'll put that aside because I don't want to open that can of worms. What's the right percentage? I do think, however, that the percent of yes votes should be calculated on the basis of the total households, not the total number of yes votes. And the reason for that is I think that it's, my observation is that you could have a small group of people who all get together and say, let's either be for or against sidewalks, and kind of not really talk about it in the neighborhood and so on, so that they could essentially, I don't want to say take over the vote, but sort of have it go their way. If you have a total, then you really do have to have every household. It really encourages the community to get an answer from every household. And I think that's a more democratic way to do it.
I'm sorry, I think I heard two different things from you, so I probably heard it wrong. You would like to have the total number of yes
denominator would be
votes?
the total number of households, not
Okay,
the
that
total
was
number.
how it was originally, that's how, that
No,
was my
I'm saying I'm
understanding.
disagreeing with
Oh,
what
okay.
Tim has proposed.
Okay.
That's all. Support everything except that. I prefer to go back to the original total households.
And I disagree with myself because I actually wrote something different than my comment suggests.
I did actually wanted to ask you that, but I figured you'd clarify that.
Councilmember Daniels, go.
I think I didn't punch.
Oh. Did you want to clarify that, Councilmember Daniels?
Sure. In 2B, at the end of that, what I had meant to write was the percentage of yes votes. Wait, what does that say? The percentage of yes votes is the number of votes divided by the total households in the affected area. I meant to say total households voting in the affected area, as Councilmember Snipper just indicated. And I could go either way on that, and my comment on this is really based on the single experience I've had in working with the city so far, where between myself and the neighborhood association and the city staff, we have mailed something to every resident and emailed them personally. We've had neighbors walking the blocks and visiting every house, and we have had the neighborhood association noticing people of this survey is coming. And so I feel like in a process like that, where you're touching people so many times, you've created a lot of opportunities for people to provide feedback, and including they can answer the survey in writing, they can answer the survey by email, they can answer the survey by phone. That's the way that Daryl has worked it, and I have worked it so far. And so to the extent to which we, the city, take the burden on ourselves to do a really good job of outreach, then that's what made me feel comfortable about, based on the response rate, the denominator being total responses. I can see if you didn't have an effort like that, you would not want a very lackluster effort to result in very few responses, and then a very small denominator and having a very undemocratic process. But my sense is that if the city does this as diligently as I've seen so far, that wouldn't be the case.
And can I just get a clarification on that process? Depending on the definition for who counts as the household, whether it's those residing there or owners, was the notification process, did it encompass both owners and residents or just residents?
My understanding is owners.
The way that this process was outlined by the council is that basically only residers
Right.
have
And then
a right to
Councilmember
vote.
Well's proposal is to change it to owners, right? And so if that were the case, the outreach that has gone on so far has not included non-resident owners? Or has it?
It has.
Yeah, in Ward 6, where we followed a slightly different process, we did send to the property owners as well as the mailed and delivered flyers to the actual residents. But
Okay,
it's my
so-
understanding that the voters would have to be property owners, but I must have missed something along the way.
And I would just, I thought the intent of the original policy was, and certainly my intent through this, was to focus it on property owners. And I think that the original text, and perhaps some of my changes, variously refer to either residents or property owners. And I think that's one area we should clarify and just maybe give.
Yeah, because I figured depending on which way we go, it could affect how we do the notice. And if we've already been reaching out in a certain way, it would necessitate a change.
The prior council was very specific that non-resident property owners shouldn't have a vote. And so that's why this was written out this way.
Right.
Happy to change it, but that was one of the things that was very specific.
I understood that, but I wanted to figure out how the interplay happened with the notification, depending on how we wanted to go. Councilmember Schultz and Councilmember Grimes.
Well, let me address this to Councilmember Mayle because I'm not clear. Forgive me for not figuring it out exactly what you're trying to do. But first let me sort of say that the experience in Ward 6 was that we held a series of meetings. We put out the information on the listservs, but in recognition that they only reach a minority of the residents in the area, the city sent first-class letters to every property owner and every address. Because sometimes, as you say, if they're absentee, there's a difference. The city also flyered the neighborhood that was being affected in Ward 6, which is, I think, what you're getting to in your comment a minute ago, is that it's a responsibility of this city to make a really super conscientious effort to get the word out. The experience, however, was that notwithstanding that, is that very few people actually came to the meetings to make their wishes known. We did not do, and this may be different, an actual survey where we sent around a survey by mail saying thumbs up, thumbs down, or something like that, and please return this survey, email, or call it in. That would be different. And I would support doing something like that. But my point being that you can't force somebody to return a survey, because if their indifference is indifference. And it was amazing to me, but apparently it's the case, is that a lot of people whose properties were directly affected, as well as a lot of people who would have been able to take advantage of the sidewalks, just did not care. I mean, that may be a pejorative way of saying it, but they just were, let's just say, indifferent. And so if you are taking, so how you count the votes then is the thing. My way of thinking is that those who care return surveys, those who don't, and what you should base your vote on is a little bit like we do in elections, is you count the votes of those who participate in the survey, and you don't count the votes, yea or nay. You don't assume that indifference means they're opposed, as some of the anti-sidewalk people would prefer that we do, and you can't assume that they support it. I mean, if you have 4 houses on a block, and 3 of them are indifferent, and one person is vehemently opposed, you'd say, well, then we should probably not put a sidewalk on that block. But on the other hand, if you had 4 houses on a block, 3 of them were indifferent, and one of them was vehemently supportive of the sidewalk for whatever reason, really wanted it, would you still say, well, you can't have it because out of the 4 households, you only count as one? I don't think you'd do that. It would be crazy. But that's sort of where we have come so far, and so therefore I'd rather have it so that we would go with, if the yes votes outnumber the no votes, that's what we count, or vice versa. But we don't go around trying to presume that people who don't participate in the survey are saying they don't want sidewalks or that they do want sidewalks. Now, does that Where are you on that? I'm trying to, how does that language?
And that's exactly where I am. In particular, and the places that I suggested changes were in the planning phase. So that doesn't even get at the issue of the actual, should we move forward with construction, where it's yet another conversation and not one that I put in the draft here of whether that should be the same test for, or maybe I did put it in. Did I? No. I did put it in there as well. So you got two places. One in the permitting phase, the planning phase, should we move forward with a plan, a design, and the other, should we move forward with construction? And so I think there are both of those thresholds, and I think for me at the planning phase in particular, you look at just the responses. I mean at that phase, the cost is so low, as you said, there's so much indifference that I think it would be a shame to count all of those indifference essentially as no votes, which is what my understanding of the earlier draft of the council policy would do.
Yeah, and I agree with you, because I think until people see something on a drawing, they can't begin to, in their mind's eye, imagine or picture what that sidewalk might look like as it would affect their property. And when they see it and they can understand better from the 30% design level, then they're in a much better informed decision to say, no, I've seen it and thank you, but that's not what I want, or, oh, wow, this isn't nearly as bad as I thought, that sort of process.
The other thing I wanted to address, and I don't mean to monopolize the time here, because I'm sure everybody else would want their comments on this issue on public record to get constituent feedback on, is the issue of, the area that's surveyed. And there, to give an example, on Jackson, there's a block with no sidewalk, a block with a sidewalk, and then a block with no sidewalk in a run. And so, in the meeting we held last week, residents on that block with the sidewalk between two blocks without a sidewalk, sort of, I think quite rarely wanted to be able to have some input in the process. And that's an example of, at the planning phase, where I think we do ourselves a favor by surveying a broader neighborhood. The other advantage is that if we survey that broader neighborhood, again, at least at the planning phase, then if we get approval to go forward with the planning process, there's a plan done, and then we go to a vote with the narrower neighborhood about construction, and then let's say you get 45%, opposed to the project, a slight majority favors going forward. Well, if we as council know that for only 55% supported moving forward, that's a pretty small majority, but 90% of the broader neighborhood supported planting the sidewalk, that might give us a little more confidence that that project actually has broader worth. And so I think it's an informational context that would benefit us throughout the process. And so to me, that's one of the benefits of that broader survey, as in addition to the specific example of Jackson that I gave. Thanks.
Councilmember Grimes.
Thank you. It's tempting to pick up on little points here and there, so I'll just add one that I haven't heard before. There are property owners of non-residential properties. I'm thinking specifically in Ward 2 of my family pediatrician owns a property that's on the corner of Flower and one block in, I forget which it is, and I don't think she lives there, but she's not a resident, she is a property owner, so there you go. What I do want to amplify is that I take a broad view of what it means to be an affected resident, property owner, individual, whoever, as Councilmember Mail was just talking about that a bit, that I think we need to view sidewalks the same way that we view streets, the same way that we view trees in this city as, I hesitate to call them even community property, community amenities, something that don't belong and don't benefit, or for that matter, don't detract from the property values of just the individual properties that they front. So I'm definitely in favor of a more expanded definition of the affected area. And I'll note that we have other discussions going on. For instance, the closure of streets in Sligo Park Hills, that we have been arguing for a much broader, larger definition of the affected area there, because we honestly believe that people who live on Ritchie, Geneva, Maple Avenue, for instance, are affected by the county's proposed closure of streets in Sligo Park Hills. Let's be consistent, not just for the sake of being consistent, because it's properly consistent in taking the view of sidewalks. We have other discussions that are going on, for instance, about speed limits in Tacoma Park. I'd hate to see us being consistent by promulgating a rule that says, okay, this block can vote to go to 15 miles per hour while the other one's going to stay at 25, and then the next block's going to go to 15. I mean, that's ridiculous. And I think it is similarly ridiculous, and I'm glad the room is emptied out, to view sidewalks in the same kind of way.
Councilmember Siemens.
It's interesting to follow after you, because I think as you talk about ridiculous and having a broader participation in the process, it leads me to wonder about the speed humps and how many speed humps we would have in the city if we used a broader definition of the neighborhood and surveyed all those who are affected by the speed humps, or bumps, or tables. And I think this is similar to that installing sidewalks can have a broad benefit. It can also have a very localized adverse effect on a neighborhood. I think as we install more and more sidewalks, the small-town character that we have always prided ourselves in Tacoma Park becomes much more of an urban area. And that's not to say I don't support sidewalks. I think that though that the local residents should have a stronger vote in the process than the broader community, just as we do for the speed bumps. And for that, well, in fact, I would say that the survey itself should follow the same approach of 66% of the households in the affected area would have to vote yes before moving ahead. I appreciate the thought that Councilmember Mayo has put into the proposed changes, and I think he addressed some of the significant problems that were in the earlier policy. I remain concerned that there are impacts of the sidewalks that are not included in the assessment of whether they're appropriate for a given location, such as environmental impact and actual traffic and pedestrian volumes. And I think those are important as we consider this. Thank you.
Councilmember Snipper.
Thank you, Mayor. I do want to make an observation. I don't want to lose sight of the fact that most of the new sidewalks are going to be proposed by the city council or the city manager for various priority or safety concerns, and that the part 2 is for those situations where the city or city manager has not identified a new sidewalk and residents would like one. So it's a fairly specialized, unique situation, because we've already identified a rather large list of places where we'd like to put in new sidewalks. And while we might modify that list a little bit, that's pretty much what we're going to go for, and it includes many years of, at our current spending, many years of installing sidewalks. So creating a priority list of ones that are requested by residents is going to put them pretty far down the list. So while I think it's important to discuss the exact details of this, I don't think it's all that critical, because a lot of the sidewalks are going to be for various priority or safety reasons, and I thought Terry's comment about on what priority basis we should make these things, on the basis of traffic and so on, are the way to judge them. And I want to clarify,
Ask a question about that? I'm sorry. It was my impression, and maybe somebody else has a different impression, but when this policy came forward, it was kind of in place of the priority listing of critical paths, tool design, critical paths, and that kind of, in Tacoma Park. And, while I personally would hope that we would use some of the tool designs rankings so that we can identify safety areas, that wasn't the direction we had last.
That was my understanding as well, is that when the council talked about how you wanted to move forward, that this process superseded any prior discussion the council had in talking about the tiers 1, 2, and 3 that came out of the tool design study.
All right, well, I'll back off from that, then, from that comment. I have a concern about property owners, particularly the non-resident property owners. We have a number of non-resident property owners who are, in my experience, not very interested in paying for community amenities, and I would be a bit adverse to giving them a large say. In parts of the city where we have a lot of non-resident property owners, they could prevent the construction of sidewalks. So I'm a little reluctant on that. In parts of the city where we have resident property owners, that's much less of an issue. So I find that a little hard to take. On whether we use the total yes, whether the percentage is calculated on the basis of yes votes divided by the number of votes, that's fine. I don't have a really strong feeling. I do think it's better to have total in the denominator, but I'm happy to go with the total votes.
Councilmember Mayo.
And I'm also okay with changing that, whether all property owners get a vote or not. If for example, you could change it to say all resident property owners get a vote or get an opportunity to vote. I'm sensitive to the comment that Councilmember Grimes made that resident might not be the right word in that modification I just proposed. It might be, it's resident property owners, businesses, churches, for example. I don't know how you correctly define that universe of people that you want to survey. But Councilmember Snipper's comment just now, I agree with. I think as well that, the first clause, number 1, the city council or city manager identifies the installation of a new sidewalk as a priority. I would hope that as we move forward, we can continue to, those things are going to come up and we're going to say, this one's a priority, let's move the process forward. Even that, though, only moves the process forward a tiny bit. It only moves the process to the point of having a community meeting, after which there's a survey. So it's a fairly small step. And I think that's where, this definition of the affected, who you're going to survey, becomes more important, actually. And that would be my last comment.
Councilmember Schultz, and I might have a comment, and then let's try and wrap this up and give some direction to staff.
The only remaining question, push my button. The only remaining question that I have is those situations where the city, notwithstanding the existence of the tool design study, but the city recognizes that there is a dangerous pedestrian situation. Let's just say that there's probably not many of those in the city, and it may not necessarily have to do with traffic volume. It may have more to do with pedestrian volume or narrowness of the street or a curve in the street that makes it difficult or something like that, but it's manifestly evident that it's a dangerous situation. We had a case like that up at the corner of Carroll Avenue and Wildwood, where there was a growth of trees extending out over the curb that created a blind spot, and there was no possibility of a sidewalk because the trees were in the way. And it was clear that the right thing to do was to take down the trees, not necessarily build a sidewalk, but my point being is that it's just something had to be done. And in those cases, I'm just asking this question because I'm not sure the answer. It just seems to me that there might be a need where the city says, well, we just have to have this sidewalk here because it would be irresponsible for us not to spend money to build a proper sidewalk, notwithstanding what the community or the neighbors on that particular street front might say. And I don't know whether our text addresses that kind of a situation or not.
Councilmember Siemens.
Thank you, Mayor. I think that, there has to be, for the community to offer a informed vote on this, there has to be more information available to the community than what we currently do. Other than just saying we're considering sidewalks, I think there ought to be a little bit more information about why and what the basis is. And so I do think that, the traffic volumes, pedestrian volumes, and the environmental impact on what's going to happen when these sidewalks go in are important factors to consider that the residents should want to consider as they're looking at this. So I would like to suggest that we add that into those factors into the process, because I think they're huge in what's happening in our community and what the effect of the sidewalks in the community.
Councilmember Mayo.
And I agree with that comment. I wonder if the best place to get that information to come in is before the council would make a decision to put money into the construction. So, at that last phase, I'm thinking that some of the information that was just described is, can be difficult to collect or time-consuming to collect. And so whether, when we get projects that move with resident support from planning to construction, and the council is then presented with the choice of paying for construction, that at that point we would try to pull that information in at that point in the process. I just think
that would be balanced by how much money do we spend before we know those factors.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah. To address the other question, just one more thing and I'll be done. We do have options in there for the council to get a design done despite the views of the residents, and to do construction despite, there's language, I think, it remains from the earlier council's document for both of those phases.
Ms. Braithwaite.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment, or pick up a comment relative to some things Terry had said. In the design process, there will be a lot of evaluation on the environmental impacts, both the tree impacts as well as the stormwater impacts, and they'll all be incorporated into the design. So a decent design, by any means, will include a lot of that information, and in fact, city code requires that the city address both trees as well as stormwater impacts as part of a construction plan. And we may also need to get county permits depending on the size of the project. So those types of issues related to environmental impacts are going to be a necessary part of the design, both on the part of city code as well as county code.
I realize that part of the design, my concern is that from what I've seen in the past in our installation of sidewalks, taking into consideration the trees that are there has not saved those trees from dying within a couple of years after sidewalks are installed. And so I'm not sure that, I understand that we're recognizing the trees are there and the trees are important to the city, but I'm not sure that we've gone far enough in recognizing what the impacts are and making that consideration before we install the sidewalks.
I'd be interested to hear more about that, because I'm not sure I agree with that characterization, but it's getting late. I wanted to make sure that we give direction to staff on how we want to modify this proposal. I'll make a quick attempt at summarizing what I think I heard. I will make no claim that I've got it all accurate. But looking at Councilmember Mayo's proposed edits as the basis for the changes, what I think I heard was agreeing with the first comment about the adding the city manager in there, agreement with the second comment about including the extended blocks for the consideration, agreement with the third comment about getting the language right about the what's divided by what, and also making it so that it's a majority of surveys received, not of the total possible, and that there would not be the change that is written in here to change it from basically residents to property owners. Do I have that correct?
I'm still confused about who gets to vote and how we track that, so that would be helpful for me if we could go over again. Because if we're moving towards a resident-only vote, we send it to dear resident of that property. If we're sending it to owners, we go through the tax list and make sure we mail out to the owners.
And what I was saying, I
If we're doing
thought I heard
both.
was residents, not owners.
I'm concerned that there may be pushback from property owners that feel like they're not able to comment on something that's going to...
What have we been doing so far?
Well, we haven't had this survey before. We're about to do the first one on Jackson Avenue. We haven't had a survey vote in the process before. We've had a notification of community meetings, and we've notified both owners and...
It seems like if you're going with the broader definition, as council seems to have indicated in other aspects of this, that you would want to include both the residents and the property owners.
And then we'd have to figure out how we count.
How do you count the percentage?
Because if it's one vote per household, are we allowing resident owners and tenants of a particular household to vote, non-resident owners and tenants of a particular household to vote?
And if it's multifamily, you can have 50 residents and one owner.
Or a corporation owner.
Or does the owner of a 50-unit building get all 50 votes? And that's why my sense was that we had it previously as resident, and that made more sense.
Made more sense to who? It sure didn't make sense to the people who own the properties and felt like they should have a say in a piece of property that they own, and the fact that they don't live there.
So then how would that process work if you had both?
Well, it would make for a more complicated evaluation process. We'd really have to get very clear with property records and tenant rental records with, code enforcement office, and we'd almost have to do beyond what the city clerk does when she's evaluating petition processes in terms of verifying those are the households on the street, and we'd have to kind of pre-decide how many potential votes could be from any particular property. There is also the case where tenants may be turning over and there isn't, or there is a tenant we don't know about, or there isn't a tenant anymore that's listed. So it's going to add to the complexity.
How do we do it on speed bumps? Don't we do it by
Just
household?
2/3%
Of the total household?
Total household.
Of the total household.
It's not property owners, it's residents.
Right.
You know, you could do it that way, and then when there's situations like commercial properties or something, have an exception for when there's not a resident, that the property owner gets it. It's a possibility.
or a church,
Right.
or a vacant lot.
In other words, does the owner of a vacant lot get a vote?
Or does the owner of a house that's rented out get a vote?
If our sidewalk policy is focused on residents, could we do so, maybe I don't support this, but I'll say it anyway. Could we do something like at the design survey phase, survey residents and property owners, and at the latter phase, survey residents and any property owners who indicated an interest in being part of it? I mean, and then you deal with I'm just trying to think of the absentee. I mean, I'm happy with any option here. I guess to me, I don't feel like this has been the impediment, at least in Ward 2, but I recognize that it's an issue in other places.
I think it's similar on speed bumps. I mean, I think this is fundamentally similar to speed bumps, that people who are going to be affected are the people who live there. So I lean towards doing the residents.
But that advocates for a smaller area, survey area then.
What is
No, I don't
snow
see
shoveling comes up a lot. And what does the code say with regard to who's actually responsible for shoveling? Is it the property owner or is it the resident?
I'm pretty sure it's the property owner.
Now, there may be owners that have requirements in
Right,
their
in
lease
their
that says you must clear the sidewalk, so it depends on what the lease agreement is.
This will include
That's an easy answer.
you have to give me your vote on the sidewalk.
Councilmember Schultz.
Oh, I'm sorry. My button was on, but I forgot what it was that I was thinking. So I will demur rather than sit here and take up more time.
So let me go for a show of hands at this point about who wants it to be. I'm going to go for the simple ones first, and if we need to, it'll get more complicated. Who wants residents? There's 4.
Is that residents only?
Yes.
It's only 3.5.
No, I take back, if it's residents only, I take back my vote.
Okay, there's 3. Who wants owners only? Who wants residents and owners? And there's a missing vote.
I guess what I would say is, I mean, for staff, is it possible, how difficult is it to survey at one or both phases, residents and owners?
But why wouldn't we do that for speed bumps? What's
don't.
I mean, you have to make the
Because it
argument.
isn't on their property, or it
some
isn't
kind of
on,
city-
Well, but the sidewalk isn't on people's property either.
in some
It's
cases.
in the right of way.
What do we do with parking permit zones?
Jesse, what do we do with parking permit zones? Fred asked.
How do we count votes?
Oh, parking permit zones? It's residents. It's residents.
Okay, I would throw my vote toward residents. There's enough other policies that are resident-focused.
And with speed bumps, like the city staff don't do that. Whoever is wanting the speed bump are the people, having been one of those folks, are the people that make that happen, do all the surveys, go door to door, get the signatures. So it's a lot of fun.
And it's residents.
So it's residents, right?
Yeah.
So
That's my
So you have
so
4
it's-
now for
It
residents?
sounds like we have a majority for residents.
Residents only. Okay.
And that includes residents and exceptions for churches, or, I mean, we're not excluding.
If there is no resident, then it would be the owner.
Yeah,
So
there's-
is that agreeable to 4, that there'd be residents only, except when there aren't residents?
Right, and then, right,
When all there are property owners.
Okay.
yeah.
Is there anything else that we discussed that wasn't encompassed in that?
Have we now agreed that it's of the total respondents versus the total households? Okay.
Well, what I said that we had agreed to and everybody nodded yes was that it's a majority of the votes received, not of the total.
I didn't nod.
Will you-
If you're quiet, then do you count or not?
If you're quiet, you're affirmative.
We can't win.
Okay. Anything else?
Why don't we see what we come up with? And make sure that, send it, I mean, at least send it back out and make sure that that's what
I'd
people
like
heard.
that, because I'm curious to see what you come up with. Seriously.
Well, and another kind of pragmatic or practical question, we've got a neighborhood who's waiting for the survey. Do you want me to hold off doing the survey until we reevaluate this language yet again, or do we proceed with survey?
You don't have a clue who you're going to send it to.
I'm going to throw it in the air and...
Throw it down the
I think we
steps.
can do the residents only plus the property.
I prefer we move
Yeah,
forward.
I would too. Yeah, I mean, even if we change the policy slightly, let's grandfather those poor folks in and get this moving.
And it's not going to take long to come back with this language, right? It's just these changes.
I think we can do that.
Yeah, I think that's pretty simple, pretty quick.
Yeah.
Were you pushing a button?
I didn't push it. I never touched it.
Well, somebody trampled on it.
It was Ted Mail who did it.
Okay, we're adjourned.
Love it.
Stare, but he's not there. There's only air. I used to look in every book.